Good morning, everyone. My name is Joaquin Esquivel. I'm chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. Today is Tuesday, February 7th. It is 9:31 a.m., and I would like to call this meeting to order. I'll begin by introducing my fellow board colleagues. With me here today is Vice Chair Doreen Diadamo, Board Member Nicole Morgan, Board Member Sean McGuire, and virtually joining us is Board Member Laurel Firestone. Here with us today as well is our Executive Director, Eileen Sobek, our Chief Counsel, Michael Loffer, our Chief Deputy, Eric Oppenheimer. Our Acting Clerk of the Board is Courtney Tyler, and assisting her today is Margie Argel and Michael Reed. As you can all see, this is a hybrid meeting. It's being webcast and recorded. For those of you that are joining us virtually, you're either viewing this one of two ways, customarily through our live webcast on the Cal EPA website or YouTube Live. But if you intend on commenting on any of the items on today's agenda, you need to be on the Zoom platform with us. There are instructions on how to do so at the top of today's agenda, but if you're having any challenges getting onto the platform, please do email our clerk of the board at board.clerk@waterboards.ca.gov, and she will help you get onto the platform. Once there, your camera will be off. You will be on mute until it's your time to talk on or speak on the item which you have indicated. For everyone here in the room, good morning. Good to see you all. We're here in the Cal EPA building in Sacramento. A couple quick things to go over. Please do observe the exits. If for some reason there is an emergency, we'll calmly file out, gather at Cesar Chavez Plaza, and await any further instruction. Additionally, if you intend on commenting on any of the items today, there should be a QR code there in the back and a way to sign up for the items. Once you are up, please do state your name, any affiliation you have, and appreciate your participation. Please do also turn off any sort of noise-making devices so that we can have our discussion here today uninterrupted. With that out of the way, I do want to here at the top note that although we usually take public forum before we get into any of the board business and calendared items, agenda items, I'm going to reorder that a bit, and we will actually take our first item, and then we'll take public forum, and then get into the rest of the board's business. Transitioning then into our first item. For many of you that are observers of this board, you may have noticed that the last months, our clerk of the board, Janine Townsend, has not been participating. Regrettably, due to illness, Janine has had to take an early retirement, and so here wanted to have this item to really commemorate what's been an incredible 15-year service to this board that is on top of already a very long service in state California generally. I've had the honor of being on this board now here for nearly 6 years, and in that time, know that when I first came to this board, knew very quickly how just central Janine was to so much of our operations, especially when it comes to many of you in the public that may have engaged with this board. Janine was always very responsive, and I quickly learned, I've had the honor of being in public service for most of my professional career, and you meet public servants times that you often find yourselves modeling yourself after. Janine was definitely that. We're here to celebrate, again, this incredible service that she's had to not just myself and the board members here, but us as an institution and truly Californians writ large. We're honored here to be joined by previous chairs that Janine served with as well. I would like to acknowledge and call up here former chair Charlie Hoppen. Good to see you this morning, Charlie, and so great that you could be here to join us.
Joaquin, thank you. Janine, I'm just sorry I'm not there to give you a hug, and I'm sorry you're not there. You know, when I was first on the board, I probably took the clerk for granted because I would have an agenda and I'd look at the agenda, and the chair at that time was Tam, and she'd go through it, and I didn't fully appreciate it. But I guarantee you 2 seconds after I was chair of the board, sitting in Joaquin's seat now, I fully appreciated how organized my agenda was. And I'll admit that sometimes on the opening comments, I deviated a little bit from your printed script, but I knew it was always all right because you'd chuckle and kind of bob your head to me, and that gave me the go-ahead to make a few comments just to amuse myself. But I don't think people really realize the full scope of your job. We would see it at a board meeting, but all of the hours that it took to organize that and put it in place and always have it be right were just invaluable to me. It made me look like I was organized. And if I had to wing that, it would have been a complete disaster for everyone concerned. So I want to thank you. I'm glad you have Andrew and Hannah at home looking after you. And a little bird told me that you recently got a new dog named Charlie. And I have to tell you, Janine, my ego tells me that maybe you named that dog after me, not because I'm a dog, but because I think you realized that Charlie would be there with you no matter what was going on and give you comfort and a little hug now and then. So I think between Andrew and Hannah and what I believe Charlie is, I know you're in good hands, but I want you to know that you're in my thoughts and prayers every day. And you're you're just one of my favorite people. You always had a smile on your face and you were always glad to see me. And I can tell you, sitting in Joaquin's chair, you don't always see a lot of people that are glad to see you. And you were always there, and I'll love you dearly forever. Thank you, Janine.
Thank you, Charlie. Felicia Marcus is here joining us as well. I want to note Janine is watching this, and our message is here for her, and our thanks is for her, and really thank Hannah and Andrew for joining us here in person as well. Felicia.
Hi, thanks, Joaquin. Thank you so much. Good morning, and it's so good to see so many of you, even virtually. It was nice even panning the room and seeing some faces I will follow up with after this meeting. I just also didn't want to miss the opportunity to join you in celebrating the absolutely incredible career and contributions of Janine Townsend to the State Water Board, to its people, and the millions of people that it serves. I just have to say, Janine is one of those unsung heroes that deserve all of our thanks. And I'm here filled with affection, respect, gratitude for all that she brought to the board and how she helped us all do a better job at serving the public than we could have ever done without her. She's one of those people who stand out in one's life, as both Joaquin and Charlie have said. It's truly one of a kind. She didn't just keep the trains running. She kept us all on our toes and demanded that we treated the roles that we all played with professionalism and respect for the public. And that's important. And that's hard sometimes when we just want to relax and be ourselves. I have to say that the orchestration of the board's work, whether in setting and sticking to or in changing agendas on the fly in a way that complied with both the rules and common decency, was something she took incredibly seriously, working crazy long hours, cajoling folks to get their materials in on time, and making sure we did things the right way. And it was amazing to watch and inspiring. I know I was a lot better because of her, and I also know I'm not alone. And how she did her job, Janine, I just can't thank you enough for this. She was serious but funny, respectful but firm, and a strong personality with a whimsical side and a true joy just to be around and work with. And while she expected and asked for the materials by a date and time certain, they certainly didn't always come in on time. And you can see it and tell it by the timestamp on her emails and materials that she stayed late to assure that the public and we got the materials as soon as possible. She didn't have to do that. She could have just bounced them, or she could have waited till the next day, but she didn't. During formal board meetings, which is really just a fraction of her massive job, she stayed on top of and responsive to the needs and requests of the public. That takes a lot of juggling and judgment, and it's something that does not always happen in every agency. Frequently, people send in an agency to start thinking of the agency as an it to be protected and managed, but not Janine. The public always came first, even as she had full respect and love for all of us. That all does take a lot of juggling and judgment, but it also takes a lot of empathy and a lot of heart. And she was great at making sure we knew who was waiting, who needed to leave early, and a host of other complex mechanics necessary to do the public's business with integrity. But I really think that perhaps most important to many of you, she brought a very human sense of what people needed. And in particular, she taught me when I was chair of the board that people need to stretch, they need breaks, bio breaks, and they need to eat. She may not have gotten a thank you note for it, but there are many people, both on the dais and in the audience, who owe her big time, since I have absolutely no time sense for breaks at all. So on this and many, many, many other suggestions of good sense, she was artful but really direct in her dealings with me and with others. And I cherish the time I got to see her every day. And I've missed her more than I can say since I've left. Her retirement is an enormous deal for the board as an institution, and to those of us in the board family as individuals. The depth of gratitude and respect I know we all share is incalculable, as is the love. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for holding this ceremony to give many of us now outside the board the opportunity to say thank you to Janine and to reflect on the gift of time and humanity that she shared with us. I mean, really, just thinking of her has always made me smile, both when I was at the board and since. And there are many not here who share the same immediate response to the mention of her name. And I know I speak for former board member Nancy Sutley and many others when I say that. We're all extraordinarily lucky to have the chance to work with her and have her grace our lives. So thank you for this, and thank you, Janine, for just a remarkable career, a remarkable life, and just making such a huge difference in all our lives. Thanks a lot, Joaquin.
Thank you both, and completely agree that in this chair, you quickly understand that there are certain folks in an institution that have an outsized role in making things work. Additionally, you find that the more competent and the better you are at what you do, the more things are brought to you. And Janine, that has definitely been the case for you, as you know, because you were, again, so central to so much of what we do and deserve this a retirement and celebration here for everything that you've provided us. And so thank you both chairs. I know that another chair that Janine served under, Tam Dodak, unfortunately isn't able to join us, but is likewise, I know, incredibly thankful for the service that she's been able to be part of and be with us around. I'd like to look to fellow board members if there's anything they'd like to add as well. Morgan.
No, Janine, I just wanted to say that it has been a pleasure to work with you for the past 13 years. As a member of staff, you helped me to do my best work and to submit my board materials on time. When I was appointed to the board, you welcomed me and provided the support I needed to transition into this new role. I cannot express how much I miss working with you daily and seeing your smiling face. And you just keeping me on my toes, keeping me doing my best work. You are truly missed.
Hi, Janine. I am sending you big virtual hugs and just really want to thank you. I'm going to talk about the human element a little bit. I don't think I can top what's already been said. I am so grateful for how welcome you made me feel when I came to the board. Because I was commuting from out of town, oftentimes I would spend the night in town and work late in my office, because if I didn't have a reception to go to or a dinner, I decided just to stay and work late, and you were always there. And we shared some amazing moments of friendship, and I just really appreciate being away from home, sometimes for several days or even a whole week. It was great because you were like my family, and you became my family. And Hannah and Andrew, I got frequent updates about you. We shared so much about, oh my gosh, I just loved her talking about you and how much she loved you. And we also shared about our mothers and, our family and our faith. And it was just wonderful to have home away from home with you, Janine. I always got a kick out of those 2 a.m. emails because that's another thing we shared. We burned the midnight oil, and I'd tell her to go to bed, and she'd email me back and say, well, you're still up, so I'm up until you go to bed. So we just had a lot of fun, and I really miss your smiling face. I love the fact that I'd leave and, my mom has dementia, so I don't get those late night calls from my mom. Did you get home on time? But I get them from Janine. You always had my back, not just professionally, but you cared for me as a human being. And God bless you and your family. I love you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Board Member McGuire.
We miss you, Janine. It's been hard. Thinking back to my experience as well, much like Board Member Morgan's, I worked as staff as an engineer for the board for a few years, and then eventually was appointed to the board about 4 years ago. And I can tell you, when I first started at the board, there was no question at all who was in charge. It was you. And everything went through you. You were the final say in anything that was going to the board, that was going up, any agenda item, and it struck fear in my heart, what might come back. But you know what? You did an amazing job. I learned why. You were in the role of the clerk of the board for good reason. You were a public servant. You were true to your word. You kept an amazing amount of items, information organized consistently. Not only did you keep the board in line, but you kept our 2,000 staff in line as well, which is no small feat. And I can tell you, once I was appointed, like Board Member Morgan, it was a seamless transition. You have always been there for me as a board member, as I was learning the ropes and how to make that change from, being a staff level employee to a board member. You really helped me get through that process, and I thank you for that. I thank you for your contributions to the state. It's really immeasurable what you've done, and I wish you well. We do miss you.
Thank you, Board Member. Yes, yeah, Board Member Firestone, please. Yes, no, sorry. I did mean to go to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I wish I could be there in person. And, I, again, can't say more articulately than all the things that have been said, but I'll just say, for me, as somebody that was outside the board, but working with the board for so many years, you were really the access point. So you were the one that made the board accessible, that helped us navigate being able to connect with the processes that the board oversees and does. Responsive, again, human, and then as I joined the board, really understood how much you were the mom, the sort of the protector, the real boss behind the scenes, the one that is really making things work, taking care of everyone, helping, new board members like me navigate, and then just helping make sure that we all feel like we can do our best in terms of the service to the state. And just as you know, you're greatly missed. We're just so privileged to have been able to work with you. And thanks for the state that we are in today in terms of all of your organization and building up those systems and helping us be a better place than when you began.
Here, thank you, Board Member.
And before we take a couple comments from the public, because they did not miss the opportunity to speak on this agendized item. I did want to reach out to Janine. Janine, I think I probably have sat at the table next to you more than any of the other staff here at the Water Board. We've had more than 300 meetings together, and I'm sorry you're not here with us today. I'm glad you're watching. But I cannot build upon what others have said before, but I do want to make two additional points that animate one thing that was said, especially by Member Firestone, and then flag another issue that I don't think a lot of us here in the Water Board, especially amongst the exec team and the board members, appreciate, which is you interact with the public in ways that none of us do. All of us are filtered to a certain degree in terms of how we interact with members of the public. We have assistants, or we don't have to pick up the phone every time somebody calls because we might be tasked with something else. But you had to interact with everybody. And we have great stakeholders, we have great public commenters, but we have a wide mix of public commenters. And you were terrific with all of them, and all of them thought the world of you. People that would have tete-a-tetes with board members and staff would love to come up and greet you here at the beside the dais at the clerk table, because you were such a wonderful person. You were the consummate professional. All the board members have said you were the power center, and it's true. In fact, we're going to make sure that Andrew and Hannah get to take home your plaque that says, "She who must be obeyed." First thing she received. I'm sure that Hannah and Andrew are all over that at home right now with you. But it's absolutely true. But not only were you the power center, but you were the moral center and the friendly face that most people associate with the board. And the second point that I want to quickly make, which builds off what Member Firestone said, was your parent role. The clerk of the board is really hard. You have to enforce rules. You have to be the heavy on certain items with staff. But you also need to be the parent to staff and bring them along so that they get it right next time, and you're not beating your head against the wall while they're beating their head against the wall. And you were always fabulous about that. You really did endear yourself to so many of the staff and so many of the public. And I think that parenting role we saw here at the board was also reflected with the tremendous job you and Andrew did raising Hannah. You have a great family, and I will miss you greatly. I'm glad that they've been able to show up today, and I know we have some members of the public who want to say some things as well.
Please.
Hi, Janine. We miss you. As you can tell from what you've heard today, we all have the utmost respect and really are missing you. I think a lot of what's been said today already really rings true with me. I had the privilege of working with you and being your supervisor for 5 years. Although I have to say at times it felt the other way around, like you were my supervisor. But that's because you had so much knowledge and you had a lot to say, and you weren't ever afraid to say it. And I really appreciated that quality. I appreciate that quality in you. It made my job easier, and it just made it more fun to work here and get the job done. As I said, what others have said already really rings true, and it's a lot of what I was thinking myself. Agendas roll out twice a month, board meetings are held, workshops are held, millions of notices go out all the time, and people don't realize the work that's behind all that. And you were the person getting that work done. And like others have said, what the public doesn't see are the emails at 2 a.m., the emails on the weekends. You were always willing to do whatever it took to get the job done. You went above and beyond routinely. And, I just want to thank you for that personally. I want to thank you on behalf of the staff. And I want to thank you on behalf of the people of California, because you've really, like I said, gone above and beyond, and we really owe you for that. And congratulations on just a exceptional career and just embodying everything that state service is about. Thank you, and I miss you.
So, ditto to everything everybody said. I know, Janine, that one thing that you were always thinking, although you didn't always say it, was that people should keep it short during board meetings. And why are they still talking? So I'm going to keep it really short because I do agree with everything everybody has said. I'm just going to say two things. One is I've been in public service for more than 40 years. I've been in a lot of big organizations, and I realized that there's always a power behind the throne. And it took me about 30 seconds to figure out where that power center was here when I came to the water board. So I didn't waste a second getting to know Janine and really admiring her and depending on her. And the only other trait that I wanted to mention is she was kind and generous and cared about people, but she also had a really snarky sense of humor, and she could, it only took a word to convey her view of someone, which didn't keep her from doing her job and being totally professional. But I have to say, I really loved that part of Janine. And so, Janine, we miss you, and I hope I kept it short enough.
Thank you. Are there folks in the audience who would like to leave a message for Janine as well? Okay, and it looks like a couple people signed up then on Zoom. I'd like to call up Cynthia Cortez.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I am Cynthia Cortez. I'm the newest Assistant Policy Analyst for Restore the Delta. Just want to make sure you guys can hear me.
We can, thank you.
Okay, great. So I am presenting today's comment on behalf of the staff at Restore the Delta who've interacted and worked with Janine many times before in our work with the State Water Board. As some of you may be able to relate, the beginning phase of actively participating in the board meetings comes with its challenges. Janine always and unfailingly helps members of the public make comments by navigating through these ins and outs. Providing timely comments in writing, in person, or virtually as part of her work. Janine has been extremely efficient and has been a rock for democracy, a big emphasis on being a rock for democracy. Janine is gracious and kind to everyone, helpful and full of good humor. We feel privileged at Restore the Delta to have worked with her, and we wish her and her family days of peace, healing, and tranquility. I would like to echo what the past chair, Felicia, mentioned. Many college students have worked with Restore the Delta in our work with the board, and we full-heartedly appreciate her understanding and willingness to work around our schedules when presenting comments. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you for those great words and appreciate the acknowledgement and work there. Thank you. And we have Ashley Overhouse as well.
Thank you, Chair. I really cannot echo all the comments already made today. I started commenting in front of the board 5 years ago, if you can believe it, and really Janine was the friendly face that made it less intimidating. She always remembered me, no matter my transitions. I've made quite a few since 2018 in different organizations and different levels. I was fresh out of law school. She always had fairness, respect, kindness. It just made speaking and interacting with the board a pleasure, which I honestly can't say about every agency or every experience I've had in this world. And so I really just wanted to come here and thank her for that. Especially during the last couple of years of the pandemic, I had absolute confidence that I was always going to be able to speak to the board no matter what happened. And during a pandemic and the entire Capitol shutdown, the board was the one place that I knew I could always still make sure that I had contact communication. It was clear and fair, and I'm just very grateful, very, very grateful. It's a privilege to have worked with her, and I will miss her.
Thank you, Ms. Overhouse. And Janine, yes, as you know, the transition from COVID into this hybrid format that I'm incredibly proud of. You look across other public meeting spaces, and this institution was able to continue its work quickly, not miss a beat, and transition over into a space that we've never been able to do, and still here have the same processes that we transitioned in through and are carrying through. And it's because of your work behind that, Janine, and just thank you, Ms. Overhouse, for, I know, that acknowledgement of a standard that's been really met. Mr. Bob Core.
Bob Gore on behalf of myself. In the 20 years I've been working with the board, she's always been there with a stern word, advice, or one of those snarky remarks, which I was not spared. My mother was a state employee. My wife is, I was, our middle daughter is. There is no higher calling than public service, and she epitomizes that. Thank you, Janine.
You're here. Thank you, Mr. Gore. Really appreciate everyone and having this opportunity to send you a message, Janine, around our thanks, our celebration of you, and I'd like to read in this resolution into the record. Whereas Janine Townsend retired on January 20th, 2023, after serving 15 and a half years as clerk to the State Water Resources Control Board. And whereas Janine Townsend began her career with the state of California on July 11th, 1994, working within the Department of Consumer Affairs for the State Board of Funeral Directors as an office assistant. And whereas Janine Townsend transferred to the Air Resources Board on February 1st, 1995, and began a career with the California Environmental Protection Agency that will last another 27 years. And whereas Janine Townsend's attention to detail, work ethic, and strong people skills led to a series of promotions from office technician to then executive secretary at the California Integrated Waste Management Board from 1996 to 1999, and then to executive assistant and executive secretary 1 within the Office of the Secretary of the California Environmental Protection Agency from 1998 through 2006. And whereas Janine Townsend joined the State Water Board as executive assistant on November 27, 2006, before assuming the duties of clerk to the board in August 2007. And whereas Janine Townsend's first board meeting in a clerk capacity was September 4th, 2007, and since that time, she served as clerk at 304 meetings of the State Water Resources Control Board, serving 14 board members and 3 executive directors and 4 chairs. Whereas Janine Townsend ensured that staff throughout the State Water Board adhered to deadlines and followed appropriate procedures to get items on the board's agendas. And whereas Janine Townsend performed her duties with diligence, purpose, and unwavering commitment to the state boards, earning the trust, confidence, and respect of board members and staff throughout the state. And whereas Janine Townsend, throughout her career, earned the affection of board members, staff, and members of the public with whom she engaged, and whereas Janine Townsend has always exhibited the highest level of professionalism and competence. Therefore, be it resolved that the State Water Resources Control Board applauds and thanks Janine Townsend for her many efforts and accomplishments during her nearly 3 decades of state service. Wishing her the best, we will truly miss her. That'll conclude item number 1. Thank you, everyone. Let's having read that, we have a resolution that we framed to present and some flowers. If Andrew and Hannah, if you don't mind just taking a quick step up, we'll hand these to you. And thank you. Everyone, we'll take a 10-minute break and we'll just come back. Thanks everyone for the time. Okay, everyone, I think we can begin to gather back. Thank you, everyone, for their participation and time, and thank you, Janine. Let's now move to public forum, which we had tucked here behind item number 1. Our first public forum commenter, I believe here is Mark Henwood, and it will be followed by Shawanda Grady and Christopher Sanders. And they may not be on the platform currently.
Now, Mr. Henwood had indicated he was going to be present here in the hearing room, and here, so I believe we can go on to the next speaker.
That would then be Shawanda Grady, which, yes, she is on this platform. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Escobar.
Good morning.
And good morning, board members. My name is Shawanda Grady, and I'm an attorney with the firm Ellison, Schneider, Harrison, Donlin here in Sacramento. I'm here this morning on behalf of our client, Blue Triton Brands. Before my remarks, so I just want to quickly echo and add to the many thanks extended to Ms. Townsend for her years of leadership and incredible work for the board. She's really just been such a wonderful point of contact, as so many of us have said, for those of us who come into contact with the board and really is going to be incredibly missed. So thank you, Ms. Townsend, for your service and all that you've done for us. Turning to my remarks, and I will be briefer than the time requested. Consistent with the letter we submitted this morning, I am here to respectfully object to the second topic identified for your closed session this afternoon, which notes the board's intent to deliberate on the proposed order being prepared by the Administrative Hearings Office on the draft cease and desist order directed to our client, Blue Triton Brands. We object to the board reviewing and deliberating on an order that has not yet been issued by the Administrative Hearings Office. This matter was statutorily assigned to the AHO, which was established as an independent organizational unit to serve as a neutral, fair, and efficient forum for adjudications. The Water Board outlines a detailed process for the board to review the AHO's decisions, but only after they're publicly issued by the AHO. And this process outlined in the in the Water Code provides opportunity for the respondent and any interested parties to provide comment similar to a Court of Appeals review of a decision by a trial court. In light of the clear language of the Water Code, as well as the apparent intent of the legislature to establish a process for a neutral hearing office whose decisions are subject to review by the State Water Board, we contend it's improper for the board to discuss in its closed session a proposed decision to which it should not yet have access. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grady. Looking over to Mr. Lawfer, Chief Counsel.
Thank you, Chair Esquivel. All the board members received, as well as the service list for the Blue Triton item, received the objection letter that was filed by counsel this morning. I will say that in the Office of Chief Counsel, in consultation with the presiding administrating hearing officer, we gave careful consideration to these issues before we schedule closed session items. We first of all believe that it's entirely appropriate under Government Code Section 11-11126 for the board to meet in closed session to deliberate on a hearing item that has been before the AHO as well as before individual board member hearing officers. The code provision specifically allows for a decision to be reached under Chapter 5 or similar provisions of law, and the Chapter 4.5 proceedings that the board conducts under its regulations are more formal, in fact, than many Chapter 5 proceedings and include all the attributes that make it appropriate to invoke that closed session, and the board has done so repeatedly. With respect to the fact that this is a referenced matter under Water Code Section 1411, Subdivision B, that's gone to the hearing office. We do not believe that makes it inappropriate for the board to meet with the presiding administrative hearing officer or any hearing officer within that proceeding for an item under Subdivision B, because the order is to be released as a proposed order for adoption by the board. That doesn't mean that a draft of the order is being shared with the board, but the board can deliberate on a decision to be reached following those proceedings. So I understand council has made their record for this matter, but There is no due process, open meeting act, or water code provision that we feel this runs afoul of, and it is appropriate for the hearing officer to join the board members in closed session for such deliberation.
Thank you, Mr. Loffer, and thank you, Ms. Grady. Next, I'd like to call up Shane, who will be, I'm trying to look at my scroll, if he's on the platform, followed by Tim Grazan.
Shane an opportunity to unmute, and Shane is joining us via phone, so it should be 06 on a phone to unmute.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can. Good morning.
Okay, good. I tried calling in last month, but after 2 hours of holding, I had to go back to my job that I was stepping out from. I'm calling about last month's racial equity plan. I'm sorry, but you all talk and write about inclusion and belonging, removing things that block people's ability to participate in water decision making, consulting with the BIPOC community to make decisions, but all of your talk and writing hasn't actually made anything better for the BIPOC community or anyone else struggling with their water bills and high prices in California. What it appears to be is the big problem is really the rich board members and rich people in the state who have no problem affording all these costs. That's the problem. Take water. Rich people in California just bring in water trucks to water their yards or use for whatever during water restrictions. Is that inclusion or just taking advantage because you can? All of my politicians for my district told me your board is the reason why we haven't built any structure to collect water for 50 years. We just had hundreds of trillions of gallons fall in California last month. Why do you not want to save some? We voted for it too. You don't consult with the BIPOC community, the poor community, or any community. If you did, you would find out most are angry with what you are blocking. You are all, I'm guessing, comfortable, rich, all of the above, people who care less for the rest of us. You care less because you know you can pay to have your water. You can pay for the water trucks. Why build structures to collect the falling water for the rest of us? I noticed accessible communication was in the racial equity paper also. How is going through 3 pages to figure out how to talk, removing things that block the ability to participate? How are your problems having a simple Zoom meeting, removing the ability to participate? I have been in many Zooms over the last 3 years, and I've never seen so many problems as last month. The 3 top executives for Sempra Gas and Electric make $60 million per year between the 3 of them. That was just reported in the LA Times. They make another $100 million in retirement. Sempra had a net income of $1.34 billion in 2021. I hope your board is not more of the same. Are our extra water bills paying for your raises right now? And I appreciate all the speakers. I appreciate the speakers last month about the man named Bill, but is it really appropriate to have them speaking first during public comment time? Honestly, that should have been its own agenda item at the end of the meeting. That is, I'm sorry, but it's disrespectful of the public's schedule. Like I told you at the beginning, I waited 2 hours. I left my job for that. I had no idea it was going to take so long. Almost the same thing has happened today. While the rest of us suffer, you guys are taking your time, and there appears to be no sense of urgency on what's going on. You might want to go out into the community and look at how people are struggling a little, or go on next door. That's really the best bet. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time and comments, Shane. I know there was a lot in there. I'm tempted to try to respond to some of it. The sort of guessing of whether we're rich up here. You don't need to guess. We have very public lives in all of this. Anyway, just thank you, Shane. I appreciate your comments. Next, I'd like to go to Tom Krazan.
I'm not sure whether you can hear me, but
we can.
My name is Okay, great. Good morning. My name is Tom Krizan. I'm the Executive Director for Californians for Affordable Drinking Water in rural areas. Just to give you a little bit of background, I am a licensed water well drilling contractor. I am a licensed engineer. I have 2 engineering licenses. I have a degree in geology. I'm past president of the California Groundwater Association for local chapter out of Fresno. And I do want to start off by saying thank you to the board for the efforts that you're doing. And with this drought and water issues, everything is very important. However, with multiple agencies within the state of California, there's some disconnect that we see is coming down the road. For example, small gasoline engines will be outlawed at the end of this year for use in California. And drilling contractors use small gasoline engines for generators and for water transfer pumps. And without these small gasoline motors, we'll have difficulty in drilling new wells. The other issue is the desire by the governor and the air board to do away with diesel engines. In rural areas, the only power source we have available to us for drilling water wells happens to be a high torque diesel engine. I'll give you an example. If we could plug into the local house for power and connect that to an electric motor, that'll only give us about 26 or about 30 horsepower, where my diesel truck has 550 horsepower to be able to drill to get to water. Things that are beginning to happen within the industry. The industry is becoming confused because most are small family-run operations and they're not very sophisticated when it comes to laws and government and things like that. They're just great tradesmen. And we're also beginning to see that we're beginning to price those that are less fortunate out of the water well market because the cost of everything has gone up so high. So I'd just like to emphasize without diesel engines, and it looks like that's the way California is going, I'm not sure how we'll be able to maintain water, especially for those that are disadvantaged. And thank you for taking my time.
Thank you for the time this morning and for flagging the issue, Mr. Krizan. I appreciate the nod. I believe next we have Christopher Sanders.
And Christopher had not joined online and was to speak if necessary with Ms. Grady.
Okay. And then, so next on our scroll is Stacy Jackson.
Was also a speak if necessary and does not appear to have joined the meeting.
I believe our next speaker then will be Natalie Escobedo Garcia. And it may be a tranche of folks, Tien Tran and Kudu Atune as well. Good morning. You may need to turn it on. Okay.
Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair and board members. My name is Natalie, pronouns she, hers. I'm a policy coordinator with Leadership Council, and in partnership with Community Water Center and Clean Water Action, we are here to provide comments on our review of revised groundwater sustainability plans or revised plans that were submitted to the Department of Water and Resources this past fall. Despite recent storms, California continues to be in a drought crisis. For groundwater levels to fully recover from drought, it would take several consecutive wet years. Likely to happen given the extreme shifts between dry and wet conditions we are experiencing due to climate change. To make matters worse, the agricultural industry continues to drill new wells and overpump our limited groundwater, which leads to dry wells, water contamination, land subsidence, and other harmful impacts. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act was passed to address these issues, and as we prepare to enter the next phase of SGMA implementation, we must ensure our basins are truly on a path to sustainability that protects all groundwater users. As plans are currently written, we do not believe they will put us on that path. As such, we are asking that plans that fail to protect drinking water users be deemed inadequate and referred to the State Water Board to begin the public process to designate the subbasins as probationary basins. Next slide, please. To ground our comments, here's a brief agenda. We'll each introduce ourselves. We want to review some important regulatory considerations, followed by an overview of general issues we found in revised plans, and an overview of issues in some of the subbasins we work in. Next slide, please. Our logos. Next slide, please. The State Water Board, in its current consultation role in SGMA implementation, has been entrusted by the state to uphold key laws to protect water for all Californians. First, we'd like to remind everyone that SGMA states that groundwater sustainability agencies must consider all beneficial users and uses of groundwater in creating revised plans, and specifically calls out disadvantaged communities and domestic well owners. To consider these users means to address the drinking water needs. Second, in adopting the human right to water, the state established drinking water as the highest use of water and requires that state agencies uphold this right by considering how their actions will impact access to safe, clean, and affordable and accessible water. Last, the State Water Board took a monumental step when it adopted the Racial Equity Resolution. In this resolution, you strengthen your commitment to equity, access, and anti-racism, which includes addressing the environmental injustices we see in accessing groundwater. Before moving to the next slide, I would like to highlight some numbers for the board. First, on the screen, this is a graph from a recent Pacific Institute report that states that based on current proposed sustainable management criteria, 1 million people could also lose water due to impacts to public water systems and proposed minimum water levels. Additionally, in a technical analysis report we had done on the revised plans, we found that 127,000 people will lose access to water from their domestic wells if current plans are approved. We'd like to note that the cost of addressing all the small water systems and domestic well failures will fall on the board, and it is already falling on the board. Next slide, please, and thank you. Oh, sorry, one more. We'd like to highlight some general issues we found all across revised plans. We reviewed these and can also be found in comment letters we submitted to both state and GSAs. First, we found that plans continue to put in place criteria that will allow for groundwater levels to continue dropping and are not protective of all beneficial users and uses of water. Second, we also found that plans continue to only monitor for a handful of contaminants. This is despite additional feedback from State Water Board staff that they had provided on monitoring for groundwater quality. Third, on the topic of monitoring networks are still small and have critical data gaps around disadvantaged communities, small water system, and domestic wells. Fourth, plans continue to fail to adequately address climate change. Last, but certainly not least, public engagement was limited, if at all, throughout the revision process. This has been an issue since GSAs began to create groundwater sustainability plans, but was particularly disappointing during the 180-day revision period. So much so that we sent a letter specifically on this issue to DWR. Next slide, please, and now thank you for your time.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and board members. My name is Tian Tran, and I'm a policy advocate at Community Water Center. First, I would like to thank the State Water Board for commenting on potential impacts to drinking water wells in their November 2021 comment letters to DWR and in the annual needs assessment. Second, I'm going to build off of Natalie's overview and describe the communities we work with in the Kings, Kauai, and Tule subbasins. It is critical to share human stories so that we understand the people and the impacts behind these plans and the numbers that are presented. Kings Subbasin covers Cutler, Dinuba, Esarosi, Seville, and Sultana. In the top photo, CWC hosts an event where we celebrated Esarosi's decade-long fight for drinking water. The second photo shows an Esarosi meeting where residents discuss their long-term solution, and the State Water Board has played a key role in this process. We must be proactive in SGMA implementation, and prioritizing drinking water users in these plans is essential to sustainable groundwater management. Next slide, please. Next is the Kauai Subbasin, which includes the cities of Lindsay, Exeter, Visalia, and small towns like West Goshen. This is a photo of Jesus Benitez, who lives in West Goshen. Last year, Mr. Benitez burned through 3 well pumps when his neighbor, a farmer, started irrigating his crops. So essentially, when his neighbor's well turned on, groundwater levels dropped, and Mr. Benitez wasn't able to pump any more water. These are the challenges that are not currently addressed in the plans. This is why the plans need to be revised, and domestic wells cannot be sacrificed for agricultural use. Water quality is another major issue in the San Joaquin Valley. Our analysis showed that the Kauai Subbasin failed to follow the State Water Board's water quality recommendations in their previous comment letters. Next slide, please. The Tule subbasin covers Ducor, Allensworth, Porterville, and other groundwater-dependent communities. Just like Kings and Kauai, the Tule subbasin failed to justify their impacts to domestic wells in their plans, and public engagement continues to be a major issue. One GSA released a GSP the same day that the board approved it, and essentially, there was not enough public engagement in that process. Next slide, please. I want to focus on the Tule well impact analysis that the subbasin did. They found that in total, 776 total wells would potentially be impacted. The majority of those wells would be domestic wells. That means that 568 households would essentially lose their access to drinking water. And what we found was that the concentration of impacts was in Eastern Tule, which covers Porterville, East Porterville, and we have major concerns about how these plans would affect households in the San Joaquin Valley. An article in Cal Matters today noted that most wells in the San Joaquin Valley have no chance of recovering unless groundwater pumping is drastically curbed. And I think we know at this point we have the solutions already. We've had a lot of discussions around mitigation and protecting drinking water wells, and I just want to call on the board and also DWR to take those considerations seriously. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the board. My name is Godo Atume. I work with Clean Water Action as a water policy analyst. I primarily work on SIGMA implementation and protecting communities. In addition to what Natalie and Tien just shared, I want to highlight the issues happening in semi-tropic currently. So at Clean Water Action, we have been engaging in semi-tropic for many years now. We work on oil and gas issues there. So we've seen firsthand the issues that this community faces. We work with Lost Hills community. On the map, Lost Hills is actually located outside of semi-tropic boundaries, but they receive their drinking water from inside the semi-tropic boundaries. They have a public supply well. Lost Hills is a community of about 2,400 people. They use about 400 acre-feet per year of water, and currently they have very high rates of over $100 per month for water and sewer. The condition currently in Lost Hills is that the GSA is proposing a landowner water budget. They're basically going to cut back the water supply for Lost Hills up to 80%. This is a community that is already facing a lot of disproportionate impacts. That means they get less water and they pay more for that water. They are also proposing cutbacks to wetlands, which Audubon, California is highlighting. I want to note that we reviewed this plan in 2020, and we actually failed this plan in our review. We found it to be incomplete. This was a GSP that failed to conduct robust outreach and engagement. They failed to contact this disadvantaged community of Lost Hills, and now they're proposing cutbacks to this community. Next slide, please. So I want to summarize and close out for what Natalie, Tien, and myself have shared. So in addition to the conditions in Kauai, Kings, Tule, and semi-tropic, we're seeing more happening across the entire state. So these are just some examples. And here for numbers, about 12,000 private domestic wells could be impacted with the GSPs we have right now. That is 127,000 people. In addition to that, up to 42% of public supply wells in this region are likely to be either partially or fully dry with the proposed minimum thresholds. I checked the Department of Water Resources dry well reporting tool this morning, and even with the rains, up to 30 wells have gone dry just in the past 30 days. On top of all of this, there's a well drilling backlog currently. So Self-Help Enterprises estimates that it could take up to 20 years to fill this gap and provide long-term solutions to communities. So what are we asking? We're asking that in addition to the efforts that the Department of Water Resources is putting in place, that the State Water Board pull measures to, one, protect the human right to water, and these communities we've highlighted here, but also other communities in the states. and that if and when plans come under your purview, that you ensure that these communities are highlighted and protected. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments this morning.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone's comments this morning in public forum, and I believe that brings us to the end of public commenters. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate the contributions. Let's now move on to item number 2 in our agenda. Bring us back to our board business. The first item here is board consideration adoption of the January 18th through 19th, 2023 board meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll move to adopt the minutes.
Thank you, board member. Second.
Second.
Ms. Tyler, can you please call roll call vote?
Board Member McGuire.
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo.
Aye.
Board Member Morgan.
Abstain. I was not present.
Board Member Firestone.
Aye.
Chair Esquivel.
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you as well. Board meeting minutes are adopted. Now gets us into a tranche of informational items. Item number 3 and 4, and item number 3 is a drought update on current hydrologic conditions. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, board members. I'm Jessica Bean. I am with the State Water Board's Division of Water Rights, and I'm going to be doing the drought update today. And I have with me today Claudia Buccelli, who's going to start us off with our hydro update. So next slide, please. And next slide again.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel, Vice Chair Diadamo, and board members. As previously mentioned, my name is Claudia Buccelli. I'm an environmental scientist in the Division of Water Rights Bay Delta Sacramento unit. So starting off with the Northern Sierra, thanks to recent precipitation, the Northern Sierra index jumped to a total of 39 inches for this water year, which is 134% of average for this time of year. Next slide, please. And jumping to the San Joaquin index, the San Joaquin received about 10 inches of precipitation over the last month, putting this index at 35.1 inches, and that's 165% of average to date. Next slide, please. In the Tulare Basin, following a similar pattern, this index is at 25.1 inches and 168% of average. Next slide, please. Overall, the snow water content in the Sierra is at record levels for this time of year. That is 167%, 205%, and 242% of average in the North, Central, and Southern Sierra. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the reservoir conditions. Several reservoirs are either at historical average or above historical average. At Lake Shasta, storage sits at just over 2.6 million acre feet, which is 86% of total storage and 50% of the historical average. Oroville is at 2.4 million acre feet, which is 113% of historical average. Folsom has roughly 500,000 acre feet and is at 110% of historical average. And New Melones has a little over 1 million acre feet and 72% of historical average. Next slide, please. Just a couple more reservoir updates. Kachuma Reservoir is at 192,000 acre feet. It's at 99% capacity and 146% of the historical average. Diamond Valley is at 61% capacity with just under 500,000 acre feet and 83% of historical average. And San Luis Reservoir is at 67% of capacity with 1.4 million acre feet and 88% of the historical average. Next slide, please. So this is our Term 91 graph, and Term 91 is currently not in effect. Since the recent storms have passed, there is overall less surplus in the system, so we are seeing the delta come closer to balanced conditions in terms of supplemental project water. Next slide, please.
Okay, so I'm just going to quickly go through where things stand with our drought efforts in the different watersheds. Next slide, please. So for the Bay Delta, curtailments remain suspended until further notice. There was an update to the water unavailability methodology on January 19th, and that was based on a workshop back in November, and it contains a refined watershed analysis and the Friant priority date adjustments. We do have another staff workshop coming up in March. It has to do with possible changes to that methodology related to water availability in the legal delta and refining return flow contributions. And all of the information on the workshop will be available on our Drought Delta webpage. Next slide, please. For Mill and Deer Creeks, the curtailment orders do remain in effect, and we have been meeting those since they went into effect in October. And just to note that adult salmon and steelhead were observed in both creeks during October and December of last year. Next slide. Russian River also has no curtailments at present, and it's worth noting that the steering committee that has worked on the voluntary water sharing program has put together a retrospective report, and they're discussing improvements for future years. So that is something that's going to be coming soon. Next slide, please. Just taking a look at some of the storage conditions related to the Russian River, Lake Mendocino gained 60,000 acre feet in the 3 weeks of storms, which is pretty significant. That's the black line on this graph here. And it's notable that flood flows were released for the first time in 4 years, and that's where you see that drop of about 15,000 acre feet. Next slide, please. For Lake Sonoma, over a 5-week period, Lake Sonoma gained 160,000 acre feet. Again, the black line, you can see it popping up right there. So both of those reservoirs are looking good. Next slide, please. So all curtailments are suspended through February 9th for the Scott and Shasta rivers. There are, the inefficient livestock watering prohibition does remain in effect, however, from September through March 31st. And let's take a closer look at these rivers with the next slide. So the Scott River is pretty dynamic. This is the red line here shows the emergency minimum flows. The blue line is the precipitation, and you can see at the end there, we had a lot of precipitation, and that's great. It's above the red line, but as you can see, it's also coming down pretty quickly. There's not a reservoir on this river, so it responds to precipitation pretty quickly. So that's coming back down to that emergency flow level. Next slide, please. The Shasta River is also pretty dynamic. You can see also well above the minimum flow red line again at the end here due to the storms. It is a spring-fed stream year-round and also has a reservoir on it, and that allows it to be a little bit more stable year-round. And if we can take a look at that reservoir on the next slide, please. And you can see that Dwinelle received 18,000 acre feet over the course of the storm period, and that's more than double the maximum level that was reached in 21-22 winter, so that's substantial. Next slide, please. I just want to remind folks that we do have a staff public workshop to discuss the current status of Mono Lake on February 15th. That's at 1 o'clock. It's going to be on Zoom only, and you do need to register for the workshop, and you can do that and get additional information about the agenda and the notice on the Mono Lake website. Next slide, please. Taking a look quickly at the dry wells reported, we did have 41 dry wells reported in January of 2023. So despite the wet weather, we are still seeing wells that are being impacted by the current drought conditions. Next slide, please. And again, if you'd like more information, we do update our drought website, and please sign up for our email subscription lists because there are dynamic things happening in the different watersheds. And so for curtailments, it's a really good idea to sign up for those so you can know what's happening. Next slide. Okay, so I'll pass this over to the Division of Drinking Water.
Actually, if I could ask a question, if you don't
Sure.
mind. Thank you for the presentation. It's very helpful. It's encouraging to see that we're in a little bit better shape than we were a year ago. I'm really particularly encouraged by the snowpack that we have now, and it's a nice place to be, but it still feels a little bit unsettling. You know, here we are. It's February. It seems like things are drying out a bit. We've had a little bit of rain recently. Do you have a sense, though, for, I didn't see slides on maybe the forecast and sort of outlook hydrologically. Could you speak, I don't know if you have anything ready, but if you do, could you kind of speak to the outlook over the next couple of months? I sense that it's going to be really critical to know and have a better sense for, is this, are we landing kind of in a dry spot, kind of similar to what happened last year? Do we have hopes for some more rain and snow in our future for the remainder of this wet season?
Yeah, so I think that's the million-dollar question that a lot of folks are asking right now, and I don't think there is a good answer. It is looking dry for the near term, but it's hard to say what the heat patterns are going to do and what the precipitation will do. The reason we took out some of those forecasting slides we had previously is because we were finding they weren't tremendously accurate. There's a lot of errors in those and didn't think they were extremely helpful. And unfortunately, we are in this uncertain time because you're right, it looks great, the snow looks great. We also remember from last year that we could have a heat wave that could take that down tremendously. So we are looking forward to the April snow survey that we think we'll get a better sense of what's happening. But we certainly have not seen a lot of folks willing to make projections at this time about what is happening. But we are certainly optimistic, but cautiously optimistic in that we've seen several times over the past years things going down. So I think we do have to still keep in mind that despite these floods and despite this sudden onslaught of precipitation, which is very beneficial, we still are in a drought.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Zuniga.
Thank you, Chair Escobar, and good morning, board members. Good to see you all virtually again. My name is Eric Zuniga. I am the Division of Drinking Water Drought Response Program Manager. And drought conditions, as you've heard, have been actually pretty stable for water systems over the last couple of months with very little change from last time. So I won't share a full drought report this time. However, January marks the first month of our new drought and conservation reporting. So just wanted to start by saying, we know that this is a really huge shift for small water systems, especially those smaller water systems. And we greatly appreciate, obviously, all of those who have signed up already and have already started reporting. And I'm pleased to inform that of 3,241 water systems required to report, which include community water systems and non-transient on community school water systems, we've had 1,375 water systems that have successfully created accounts with our first reporting deadline coming at the end of April. So far, the feedback is users have reported the report is very easy to use and simple to navigate through. And I wanted to reiterate the value of the reporting, even with the wet start, as we've heard, to the water year. Just in the last week, we've discovered 3 water systems that are all schools that are actually hauling water through our system already. So just to highlight the value of some of that information that's coming through. We have 9 water systems, I believe, that reported on severe water shortage. So we're continuing to utilize that data to hopefully help these systems. We've already completed 3 brown bag webinar trainings for water systems, and we've helped folks create their accounts and collected some very thoughtful feedback that we are taking back, obviously, into our development. And we have 4 more brown bag webinars that are planned through April. And if we need to put more dates for that, we certainly can. We have staff that are manning our drought email box, trying to respond to those questions as soon as we can. There is quite a flood, but we are getting through them, and we're fielding questions as they come in and attempting to update FAQs as needed. So we're in this for the long haul, just working around the clock to get everybody else on board to create an account and getting ready for reporting. Drought has become a way of life for us in California. and we're here to assist in any way we can. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Mr. Zuniga. Mr. Garrett. Oh, you may need to turn on the mic. Sorry. Good morning.
There it is. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Esquivel and members of the board. My name is James Garrett, a Senior Water Resource Control Engineer with the Division of Financial Assistance. And today I will be providing a brief update of our drought-related funding activities. Next slide, please. So this slide summarizes our drought funding activity since July 1st, 2021. Since then, we have committed funding to 9 urgent drinking water needs projects and 22 emergency repair projects through the Self-Help Enterprises Emergency Program for a combined total of $3.5 million. We have 3 new regional and county-wide programs in place for a total of $6.3 million. We have added $41.4 million through amendments to our existing regional programs. And overall, we've provided interim solutions to 30 communities specifically related to drought issues, providing assistance to over 41,000 people. And again, since July 1st, 2021, we funded 63 drought resiliency projects totaling $440 million. These projects have provided long-term solutions for drought resiliency to 70 communities and over 2 million people. Next slide, please. This map here shows the State Water Board funded existing regional and statewide programs that could help with drought response for services such as well repairs and replacements or bottled water and hauled water assistance. Currently, we have approximately $69 million available in these programs. In addition to these programs, we also have technical assistance that is provided across the state through a number of agreements with various technical assistance providers. These agreements could potentially also assist with drought-related issues, with approximately $60 million remaining. Next slide, please. And this slide shows the current number of households enrolled under our regional programs that provide bottled water, hauled water, point of use and point of entry treatment, and well repair or replacement services. So the number of households that are shown here, they only represent a snapshot of our current enrollees, and the total number of households which have received these services is higher over the life of the programs. Next slide. And for today, I wanted to highlight one urgent drinking water needs project for Elms Mobile Park, which is located in Indio. This water system serves 100 people through 47 residential connections. On October 3rd of 2022, the board approved the use of an expedited funding process utilizing the urgent drinking water needs application for smaller, more straightforward consolidation projects. DFA staff began working with the Division of Drinking Water to identify good candidates for utilizing this expedited process. Elms Mobile Park was identified as part of this process. The project had existing technical assistance, and it was proceeding down our traditional state revolving fund funding process. In the past, mainline leaks and future potential leaks would prevent the water system from always providing safe drinking water to its customers. Consolidation with Indio Water Authority was proposed as a long-term solution. So on December 20th, 2022, DFA approved the urgent drinking water needs request for a grant of $461,328 from the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund. The approved project will fund the installation of a master meter in the right-of-way of Indio Boulevard and connect Elms Mobile Park to the Indio Water Authority distribution system. The well, storage tanks, booster pump, and electrical equipment will be removed and disposed of as part of this project. Construction will begin soon, and it is anticipated to be completed by July 30th this year. And just to note, had this project continued down the typical construction funding process, we estimate costs of over $300,000 just to complete the planning phase work of the project versus completing the entire project through this urgent drinking water needs process for just over $460,000. Next slide, please. And lastly, I'm just providing links to some of the drought funding resources that we have available. And with that, we are available for any questions before handing things back.
Thank you. Really appreciate the update. I know there's a lot going on. Eric Ekdahl, our deputy director here at the Division of Water Rights, I know is over at the California Food and Ag Board presenting on a lot of the recharge work that is also going on amongst this drought response. So just thank everyone for their time. I know it's really busy right now. And right now is certainly the time to be, and I think the lesson here is we don't know what these next months will bring. And so really anticipating what summer conditions might look like now, or the range of those, and starting to plan, whether it's a water system, a grower, others, is really important because we just don't know. We have to be able to pivot as Mother Nature provides what she will. So thanks, I appreciate that. Any other questions from board members? I think we have one commenter that we can go to otherwise then. And then let's go to Kaya Rivers. Good morning, good to see you in person here. May need to turn on the mic. If it's green, it should be working. Okay.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, Chair Esquivel and board members. Thank you, board, for the opportunity to provide comments today, and thank you for a very informational drought update. My name is Kai Rivers, and I'm a policy advocate at Community Water Center, highlighting the needs to protect small disadvantaged communities' access to drinking water. Almost 1,500 wells went dry across the state last year in 2023, and 2022, I apologize, and 55 have been reported dry so far in 2023. Additionally, between the months of December and January, California experienced intense rainfall and flooding. These whiplash events demonstrate that climate change-related extremes are already occurring in California, and our disadvantaged communities are on the front lines of the climate crisis. Even as families were experiencing severe flooding, domestic wells in the Central Valley were still going dry. Resident calls to technical assistance providers for access to replacement water did not stop, and wells that have already gone dry remain dry. With hundreds of homes waiting for replacement wells and almost 2,000 families currently relying on hauled water, it is apparent that a single wet year is not enough to pull California out of the drought. It will take years for the state's critically overdrafted groundwater basins to recover. Because of this, the governor's drought emergency declaration must remain active. The state must be proactive in addressing future and current drinking water needs impacted by the ongoing drought. And we ask the State Water Board to work closely with the governor's office to ensure that the drought emergency declaration remains active until all Californians are no longer at risk of losing drinking water due to water shortage. Additionally, as climate change events accelerate with both intensity and frequency, we urge that the State Water Board work closely with other government agencies in addressing climate mitigation and adaptation. Statewide coordination is critical in order to bolster climate resilience to reduce future impacts. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide comment.
Thank you, Ms. Rivers. Really appreciate the comments and good to see you here in person. Thank you. Board members, anything further? And then if not, we can conclude item number 3. And then let's transition then, and thank you. Really appreciate, again, the presentation and update. And let's move on to item number 4, which is an update on monthly water production and conservation data reported by urban water suppliers. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel and members of the board. Good to see you all. My name is Charlotte Ely, and I am the Climate and Conservation Advisor board and for the Office of Research Planning and Performance, and I'm here today with Dr. Rodero. We'll start the presentation off with the monthly conservation and production update, and I will provide a conservation tip to close.
So just some
context, before we start with the numbers, December 2022 took a drastic departure from the weather conditions of the prior month, with progressively stormier weather culminating in an atmospheric river event that caused localized flooding and blackouts throughout California. The effects were largely concentrated in the northern and central parts of the state, as seen in the precipitation map on the left of the slide. So if we compare drought maps from the end of November in the center versus the beginning of January to the right, we can see that the central part of the state is still red as of January 3rd, indicating extreme drought. But the dark red area, indicating the most severe drought category, has disappeared entirely from the map, and other parts of the state have dropped down to less severe drought classifications. However, we are not out of the woods yet, and the statewide drought emergency remains in effect. We will be continuing to monitor hydrologic conditions in order to inform. Next slide, please. December 20 has been a month of both wet and dry extremes over the past few years. So December 2022 was one of the wetter months, and residential per capita use averaged 64 gallons per capita daily statewide, which is a drastic departure from 2 years prior and 2 gallons per capita daily lower than 2021, which also featured stormy conditions. Slide, please. December 2022 resulted in the largest savings we have seen since we began collecting this data at 17.1% savings relative to December 2020. This brings cumulative savings to 6% from July 2021 to December 2022. That is about 305,000 acre feet over the course of 2022, or 540,000 acre feet saved since the governor's July 2021 emergency declaration. Next slide, please. So in December, when we look at the regional breakdown, the coastal regions saw the largest declines relative to baseline. In particular, the South Coast region, which is home to over half of the state's urban water supplier population, led in December statewide savings with an over 20% reduction in water use relative to December 2020. Savings get slightly smaller inland, but overall the numbers are impressive. Next slide.
Yeah, and I just have to note, given what we know are ongoing pressures on the Colorado River, this message of continuing to conserve, to continue to do our part because of the long-term challenges is really being heard. Californians are stepping up and conserving here in ways that, I'll be candid, other basin states aren't. So, I think that we're all, aware of, Californians are activated and are here part of a solution, not just in the immediate, but I think in the long term when we think about how we need to continue to ensure we are efficient. It's not the only strategy out there. It is also about investing in especially here in these moments, the stormwater capture, groundwater recharge, water recycling, and other things. But very proud of what Californians continue to show, ultimately our Western partners, when it comes to the seriousness that we're taking our water challenges here in the state.
Next slide, please. All right, so our conservation tip for this month is to plant a climate-ready tree. We'd like to dedicate this conservation tip to Janine Townsend, and I personally would like to dedicate it to the newest member of my family, Reverie West Chang, who was born last night. So trees, as I think we have discussed in previous conservation tips, use less water than turf while providing a multitude of benefits. So they reduce the urban heat island effect, they can reduce stormwater runoff, and they sequester carbon. Researchers here in California have found that turf can use anywhere from 4 to 10 times as much water as trees. And trees also could rely less on sort of subsurface irrigation because their roots go deep into the ground and they can access groundwater. This can help to offset potable water needs. Additionally, they can be more easily irrigated with alternative sources of water, like gray water, for example, which we've talked about in previous conservation tips. And then by casting shade, trees can actually reduce the evapotranspiration of turf. Researchers in Colorado have found that the shade that trees cast over turf can actually save as much water as the tree itself needs. So they sort of pay for themselves, as it were. So it's really important to plant the right tree in the right place. And we are now leaving the period of time when it makes sense to plant a tree in California right before the hot, dry season starts. And so our tip is to, if you are thinking about planting a tree, make sure you consider the size, make sure you consider the location, make sure you consider whether or not it's appropriate for your particular place. And with that, I think we will conclude. And if there are any questions board members have, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Appreciate the update and the good numbers that we continue to see from it. Colleagues, anything? And virtually as well? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate the update. And that concludes then item number 4. We didn't have any commenters present on it. Let's go ahead and transition to item number 5. Contemplating perhaps a break, but let's do that because I think we won't be able to get through our agenda prior to needing to take a lunch anyway. So, 5, Mr. Lilly. Good morning.
It's been a while since I've appeared in person, but good morning.
Good to see you.
So Chair Esquivel, board members Morgan and McGuire, my name is Alan Lilly. I was, through January 31st of this year, the presiding hearing officer of the State Water Board's Administrative Hearings Office. And effective February 1, I've assumed the position of senior hearing officer within the same office. And I am still the assigned hearing officer for this matter. So just by way of quick summary, last June, the board adopted Order WR 2022-0152, and that order granted the petitions of the Garberville Sanitary District to change its water right license and water right permit to add 18 acres within the Southern Humboldt Community Park to the authorized place of use that was specified in the license and the permit. And most importantly, the order concluded that the board's approval of the petitions would not result in injury to any other legal user of water, would not unreasonably affect fish, wildlife, or other in-stream beneficial uses, would be in the public interest, would not cause the initiation of any new water right, and would comply with the California Environmental Quality Act, obviously we all know as CEQA. And the order then directed the Deputy Director for the Water Rights to issue a new amended water right license and new amended water right permit. There were appendices A and B to the order included the forms of the new amended license and permit. And with those amendments, the authorized place of use in each would be expanded to include the additional 18 acres within the park, which allows the Garberville Sanitary District to provide potable water for 2 residences, existing outbuildings, and some public drinking fountains. On July 18 of last year, Edward Voice, who had been one of the protestants to Garberville Sanitary District's change petitions and who had participated in the hearing, filed a petition for reconsideration of the board's June order. And the primary argument he made in his petition for reconsideration was that the board's adoption of the order did not comply with CEQA. And it's the history is a little bit complicated. There are 3 different local public agencies in Humboldt County that have adopted different CEQA documents, and there's some interrelation between them. We did set this out, I think, quite clearly in the June order, and then basically summarized it in the proposed order that's before the board today. Basically, in 2013, the Garberville Sanitary District adopted an initial study and mitigated negative declaration for its proposal at that time. In 2016, Humboldt County adopted or certified an EIR for proposed changes within the park. And then in 2019, Humboldt County LAFCO, the Local Agency Formation Commission, adopted an addendum to the 2013 initial study and mitigated negative declaration, basically for the project that was being proposed at that time, which was an out-of-service area expansion of the district's ability to provide water service. There is a specific provision in the government code that LAFCO administers that allows LAFCO to authorize service outside of a district's normal jurisdictional boundaries. And so LAFCO adopted a CEQA addendum and then went ahead and authorized that addition. And that CEQA addendum also did describe the proposed petitions to the State Water Board. So the Water Board was able to use, as CEQA guidelines encourage in situations like this, basically require, under most circumstances, the board deferred to the three local agencies' CEQA actions for the board's CEQA compliance. So the second argument that Mr. Voice makes is that this was improper piecemealing or segmenting under CEQA. So the proposed order, if the board adopts it, would deny the petition for reconsideration. Regarding the first argument, the proposed order explains that the board properly relied on the 2019 CEQA addendum for the board's CEQA compliance. There was some question about footnote 15 in the board's June 2022 order, and the proposed order would clarify that footnote just basically confirmed that the 2016 EIR was not in the direct CEQA documentation because LAFCO adopted an addendum in 2019 to the 2013 initial study and mitigated negative declaration. And that even though the 2019 addendum refers to the 2016 EIR as a reference document, there's nothing improper with that, and it's not in, I'll say, the direct CEQA line of documentation here. And then regarding the segmentation and piecemealing argument, the proposed order quotes the parts of the order the board adopted last June, which basically explained why those arguments were not appropriate. So for these reasons, the order would conclude that the board should reject Mr. Voice's arguments and deny the petition. I do want to say, in fairness to Mr. Voice, he has been a constructive contributor during the process. And while we obviously don't agree with his CEQA arguments, the board, my proposed order, which the board adopted, did in fact include two new permit terms that were in response to his comments. One was restricting the amounts of water that the sanitary district could deliver to the Humboldt Community Park to the amounts that were analyzed in the CEQA document. And the second one requires the district to actually report that to demonstrate compliance with that term. He also did make some productive comments on the prior draft of the order for his petition regarding which agencies in the local Humboldt County were the CEQA lead agency and which ones were the responsible agencies. So I do want to say I appreciate Mr. Voice's constructive comments, but on this question, we just disagree. I think the board clearly has complied with CEQA, and therefore the petition should be denied. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lilly. I appreciate, as always, the great and thorough work and the acknowledgement of an actual benefit and contribution to this, even again, if we're not landing in the same place with Mr. Boyce. So I appreciate the acknowledgement of him and his effort in this. Questions, but I'm looking to my colleagues in case, and not seeing any, we can go to our commenters. And I believe our first one is Mr. Edward Voice.
And I know Mr. Voice is on the platform. We did see him earlier. I've given him an opportunity to unmute. And as we get ready to transition, I will point out for the board that there was a packet of materials in an email that Mr. Voice had sent in to the clerk. It was actually after the comment deadline for the proposed order. But most of the items in that were actually photographs and evidence that were not within the scope of the administrative hearing and are outside the question that's presented. We'll certainly hear from Mr. Voice now and his comments on the proposed order, but I wanted to make sure the board was aware of that. Mr. Voice.
Appreciate that, Mr. Laffer. Mr. Voice.
Good morning. Thank you, board chair and board members. You can't hear me okay, correct?
We can. Thank you. Good morning.
I'd like to summarize my comments that I've already submitted and mainly talk about the exhibits that I sent for this reconsideration. Mainly what I want the board to understand is, number one, during the CEQA process for this change petition by the Garberville Sanitary District to provide water to the community park, the park was not included in the annexation for water service through that 2013 annexation CEQA document. And when the park did complete their 2016 EIR and general plan amendment, there was no language, no analysis, no general discussion that they would actually be getting water from the Garberville Sanitary District. All their water was going to be used on site from their water sources. So this is where I was confused and want to emphasize these 2 points, that during the process of the change petition for GSD to provide water to the community park, they were using these documents as their CEQA process through the addendum that Humboldt LAFCO produced in 2019. And that's why I was calling it piecemealing, was that they were using the documents that didn't include the park in those CEQA documents as evidence that it was done, when in reality, it wasn't done. And I would like to add that, yes, the park is mentioned in the 2013 annexation, but only as a possible future growth or development site. They don't cite any of the objects that was mentioned in the LAFCO 2019 addendum. And for those reasons, that's why I requested a reconsideration on this, because it just seemed like it was just going over everyone's head that these items that I'm bringing up were not what they were told or said about in the proposed order or from Humboldt LAFCO through the CEQA process. I don't know if you want to go over some of the exhibits that I submitted, but they do prove, and it is stated in the 2013 annexation document, that the park was not included in that CEQA document. I also have exhibits that show from Humboldt County that through the EIR GPA process the park went through in 2016, it did not mention any facts or uses of GSD water through that whole EIR process. So this is why I'm objecting to approving this change position. It's up to you if you want to do it or not. I would like to touch, since it directly affects what you already approved, I would like to touch on some items that just came up on February 2nd that I sent an email to Mr. Lilly that shows that the Garberville Sanitary District made a connection to the Southern Humboldt Community Park, and it is not in the location that was named in the documents that you guys approved, nor was it connected to a completely different water line that is restricted under Humboldt LAFCO's authority. And it kind of came out of left field for me when we found out. And there's been some argument back and forth between myself and Jenny Short, representing GSD as a consultant, that everything was kosher, nothing to see here, move along. When in reality, what you approved through that change petition for GSD has been changed already without any notification to your board, to the Division of Water Rights, or even Humboldt-LAFCO. Humboldt-LAFCO has not approved their connection to this new water line to provide water to the Southern Humboldt Community Park. So Mr. Lilly has all my comments, photographs. That's what the gentleman was talking about. That wasn't on this agenda item, but it has almost everything to do with this same agenda item because it just happened on February 2nd. I guess they were in a hurry. They didn't want to wait until my reconsideration was completed. So they went ahead and just installed a lateral water line to the park property anyway. If you would like to go through those exhibits, I can, but they do demonstrate that the community park was not a part of the annexation or water service. And it does show that the community park 2016 EIR did not include water service from GSD. So those addendum that LAFCO provided in 2019 obscures everything. They don't talk about what was actually said. They just cherry picked items from the 2013 annexation, the 2016 EIR, and put them together to make it all sound kosher. And in my mind, it is not. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Voice. We have a couple more commenters. I believe we have Janine Short and then Kristen Vogel.
Good morning. This is Jenny Short. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I would just like to say that the district has really appreciated Mr. Lilly's thoroughness as well. He's been very thorough in his explanation for the order that's currently before you of the CEQA process that the district and the other local agencies in our area have gone through to get to this point. None of those have been challenged, and they've stood without challenge. We are completely supportive of the proposed order that is being put forward, and we really look forward to being able to extend water to the park. Just to clarify some misinformation that Mr. Voice gave, the district has not actually connected the park to any of our water lines. We did install the lateral off of the Kim 2 water line. We have done all of the necessary coordination with LAFCO to be able to have the approval to do that. Even if that is unbeknownst to Mr. Voice, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. And I have provided all of those documents to him. Ms. Metz would have been happy. She's the executive officer for LAFCO to have appeared if necessary. But like was stated at the beginning, that lateral isn't really a part of what you're considering today. So we encourage you to go ahead and take action so that we can move forward with providing potable water to the residents on this piece of property that have not had potable water for over a decade now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Short. I appreciate your participation and for the project. All right, and we have one more commenter, Kristen Vogel. We had someone else sign up, Linda Sutton, but I don't believe she is on the platform. Ms. Vogel, you should be invited to unmute. Good morning.
Hello, my name is.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Ms. Vogel.
And I've been attending the monthly board meetings of the Garberville Sanitary District for the last 14 years. I've been 90% of the time, I've been the only member of the public in those meetings. And I've witnessed quite a lot of, to me, disappointing, irregular behavior. And I would go so far as to say scofflaw behavior from that, in the behavior of that board and throughout that 14 years. And for that reason, I do urge you to seriously consider the issues of this reconsideration petition from Mr. Boyce. I support the issues that he's describing. And I think that Garberville Sanitary District and the Southern Humboldt Community Park have been steeped in a culture that's quite, prevalent in our area that doesn't take regulations seriously. So that's what I would like to tell you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vogel. I appreciate your time and participating in this item and your contributions to this. Thank you. And for attending your local sanitation district's board meetings. That's very important. Thank you. Board members?
And Chair Escobar, we did identify Ms. Sutton. She was
Oh,
in
she's
under
on.
another name, so
Okay.
go ahead and ask her to unmute.
Apologies. Ms. Sutton, please.
Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Is it still morning? It seems like a long day.
I hear you.
I glad to be able to participate in this part of the hearing. I'm conflicted in that I came with my own comments, but I am also a member of the board of directors for Redway Community Services District. And unfortunately, our general manager is unable to be here today. As far as I know, he's working hard and he is maybe on family leave. And the board member who appeared with me last time, Diane Griffith, who is our vice chair, is out of town. But I did want, so I definitely want to be clear that Redway Community Services District still supports all the information in the 4 letters, maybe possibly one more, that have been written concerning the issue. You know, the water wars are alive and well in this area, and people, those of us who follow regulations and try to stay abreast of the news, and take regulations very seriously for the good of all the people who count on this limited resource. You know, I pursued this subject as a protestant because I take it very, very, very seriously. I've been in this area for over 71 years and had a chance to see a lot of things that have transitioned. And I don't really like to live in a black market community, but hey, this is it. And unless you move out of the area, you have to put up with a lot of information that you don't know is correct or if regulations have been followed. I stayed with it as a protestant because I wanted to get information for myself. And I have so many questions about this whole process, which I cannot even begin to lay out for you. And I will just simply say and reiterate how the board of Redway Community Services District has read a lot of the material, asked a lot of questions, and taken this very seriously. We support Mr. Boyce in his research and his ability to stay on top of late-breaking news. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton. I really appreciate your engagement at the local level and here with the board as well on the issues concerning water management. As you said, these things can be complicated and not easy to track, but appreciate your engagement around it.
I do have one question, and I don't know if you could clarify it. Hello?
Yes, we can attempt to try to clarify, yes.
Okay. Well, one of the facts that we all know, or a lot of us know around here, is that the South Fork of the Eel River is fully appropriated. And I think a lot of us want to know just exactly what does that mean? We think it's so important, but people seem to always gloss over it. And not only that, I think it was your chairman, Mr. Escobar, who summarized it in the first information sheet when we started this. So my question would be, that hasn't changed. The river is only in worse condition now than it was when the study was done many years ago. And what is the opinion? Is this important? Do you ever consider this when you're dealing with requests that concern the South Fork of the Eel River?
Thank you, Ms. Sutton, for your question. Looking to Mr. Lawfer.
Yes, Chair Escobar. In terms of the listing of fully appropriated streams, essentially when water bodies appear on that list, it means that the division staff will not be processing new appropriations for water from those streams during the times that are covered by the fully appropriated stream designation. And there is a process the board is familiar with. We've been doing it on at least one river system in the San Joaquin Valley to amend the fully appropriated stream system declaration when there are opportunities for diversions. We're starting to see those, for example, in high flow conditions or when new water becomes available for appropriation. But what it means in the EEL is that for those reaches that are covered by the fully appropriated stream designation, that the division would not receive or would not accept and process any new appropriative water rights permits.
Thank you, Mr. Lawfer. And again, thank you, Ms. Sutton. And if you do have any further inquiry, please do just reach out to the board, and glad to be able to answer general questions. So thank you. Okay, that concludes our commenters for item number 5 here. Looking to colleagues if there is anything further to reflect on, thoughts, and then otherwise would entertain a motion.
I'll just say I appreciate Mr. Boyce and the other commenters today. I know this is when looking at this from a CEQA perspective, it's not ideal. It's not the perfect approach. But I think, based on our decision, our deliberation last year, this is the right deference to a local lead agency here. That's what we discussed. And so what I've heard today and what I saw in the petition for reconsideration was not a lot of new information. It, ultimately was the same concerns that Mr. Boyce continues to have about this issue. So, for me, I just haven't heard anything that would persuade me to go in a different direction than what we heard. So I do support the order in light of that, and I'm prepared to make a motion to adopt.
Thank you, board member.
I'll second.
Thank you. Ms. Tyler, can you please call a roll call vote?
Board Member McGuire,
Aye.
Board Member Morgan,
Aye.
Board Member Firestone,
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo,
Aye.
Chair Escobar.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. And appreciate everyone's contributions. And thank you, Mr. Lilly. The item is adopted. That concludes item number 5. Let's go ahead and move on to item number 6. What we can try to do is just work through what will be, especially after item number 6, pretty quick agenda, and we can try to get out of here before lunch. Yeah, and please, folks should take breaks as needed. Forward in our agenda. So next, item number 6 is a public workshop to receive input on the draft guidelines for the expedited drinking water grant funding program. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Esquivel and members of the board. We are happy to be here today to present item number 6, which is the board workshop for the draft guidelines for the new expedited drinking water grant funding program. My name is Pete Stamis. I'm an associate sanitary engineer and a project manager in the Office of Sustainable Water Solutions within the Division of Financial Assistance. And with me today is Division of Financial Assistance Assistant Deputy Director Megan Tosney. The workshop will include a presentation about the draft guidelines, as well as the opportunity for participants to provide oral comments. We did want to note here that any interested person may ask questions or provide input. However, formal written comments should not be submitted during the workshops and instead should be submitted according to the procedures in the submission to comments section of the public notice, which is posted on our website. Also with me here today is Jean Fung of the Office of Chief Counsel. I will be presenting a summary of the draft guidelines today, and then afterwards we will open the workshop up to any questions or comments. Next slide, please. So here's a general overview of the workshop. I will first provide some background information on the need for the new program. We will then cover a few highlights from the draft guidelines, including the funding sources that will be utilized, eligible applicants and project types, prioritization, and grant limitations. I'll go over the application and agreements in a little more detail. I will also discuss the actual application form itself, which is also known as the project proposal form, and a few attachments. Then we'll, as mentioned earlier, we'll have time for questions and feedback. Next slide, please. So a bit of background as to why the program is being created. In recent years, the Division of Financial Assistance has been tasked with administering several new state grant funding sources. These include the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund, as well as the Infrastructure Appropriation Funds. And concurrently, for the last couple of years, the division has been identifying and implementing numerous process improvements across our programs. Our programs have also recently been reviewed externally. 2 audit reports, one by the California State Auditor and another by the Environmental Finance Center at California State University, Sacramento, were completed in the fall of 2022. And both of these informed the division of the need for a new expedited program. Here's an excerpt on the screen from the State Auditor's report. It said, develop a process to fast track urgent water projects, particularly for failing water systems affecting a large number of people or serving a disadvantaged community. One option for doing so would be to use state-only funding that is not subject to federal requirements. So with all these reasons in mind, the division began work on the creation of the new expedited drinking water grant funding program to be able to help move forward priority drinking water projects more quickly. Next slide, please. So these are the state grant funding sources that are currently that the division is currently charged with administering. Each of these have been identified within the draft guidelines. This includes the Proposition 1 funds, Proposition 68 funds, the Infrastructure Appropriations, and the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund. And it's important to note here that these funds would continue to be administered through the regular Drinking Water State Revolving Fund program, and that this new program would only provide a separate process through which a subset of projects would receive funds on it using this expedited process. Next slide, please. Eligible entities in the draft guidelines include public agencies such as cities, counties, and special districts, as well as public school districts, and of these, those that own and operate public water system facilities. Regarding eligible projects, the program will only fund construction projects, although upfront design, engineering, and environmental work may be included. Projects must benefit small, severely disadvantaged communities, small disadvantaged communities, small non-disadvantaged communities, or expanded small disadvantaged communities and severely disadvantaged communities. And the project must address an urgent problem in categories A through D as is defined in the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund policy, and or be a consolidation project. And so to clarify the phrase a little bit, category A through D a bit, all of our drinking water projects are given a ranking per the policy for implementing the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund policy. Category A being those projects that address the most immediate health risks, and category F primarily being those that include lower risk infrastructure projects like pipeline or tank replacements. So projects in categories A through C address serious drinking water public health issues, and category D projects are those that are needed to build system reliability and resiliency. So we are again targeting those higher risk and priority projects in this expedited drinking water grant funding program, as well as any consolidation of projects across the state, which is of course a priority for the state board. Next slide, please. So the guidelines also include a list of priorities for the program, and I'll just go ahead and read those that are here on, listed on the slide. So projects that support the state's policy on the human right to water, projects that are identified by the regulatory agency as high priority, projects that are needed to prevent or address drought-related shortages, projects that have a reasonable schedule to completion, and projects that qualify for a CEQA exemption or the CEQA process has already been completed. So in our evaluation of project proposals, DFA will prioritize projects based on these criteria. Next slide, please. The expedited program will utilize the same per connection grant limitations in the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund policy and intended use plan. However, there will be a $10 million cap per project for under the expedited program. The guidelines, the draft guidelines do provide exceptions to this $10 million cap on a case-by-case basis with approval from the Deputy Director of the Division of Financial Assistance. Next slide, please. The division anticipates accepting project proposals for funding projects in rounds. For the project's initial rounds of funding, DFA will identify projects for which partial or complete applications have been submitted under the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund program, and will work with those applicants to determine which would best qualify under this new program. We'll again work with those applicants to collect information and documentation that we need to send award notifications and prepare a grant agreement under the new program. Excuse me. Subsequently, DFA will periodically announce a deadline for project proposals. Award notifications will set deadlines for any necessary deliverables needed to make a project proposal complete to ensure a grant agreement can be prepared timely. Slide, please. Here's an overview of the funding process for the new program. Project proposals will be submitted to DFA electronically via the Financial Assistance Application Submittal Tool, which is also known as FAST. DFA will review each project proposal for completeness and eligibility. Among other things, there must be an engineering document that outlines the selected project alternative and the associated scope and cost. Applicants or projects that are ineligible or perhaps are not ready for funding under these guidelines may be directed to other funding programs or referred to technical assistance as applicable. Next, DFA will send preliminary funding awards to qualified projects. The notification will identify draft terms and conditions that will be in the grant agreement and include deadlines for deliverables that need to be completed in order for them to receive the grant agreement, such as an authorized representative resolution or a TMF assessment form. Grant agreements will then be issued to recipients. The agreement will have deadlines for the recipient to prepare and submit any remaining technical, financial, and environmental information. Once that information is received and reviewed, DFA will authorize the recipient to proceed with the solicitation for construction bids. Following the bidding process, DFA will review the selected bidder's documentation and allow for the release of funds for construction costs. One important note that we wanted to make here is that DFA will not release funds for construction unless and until the completion of the SWRCB process, which includes the State Water Board making its own findings under SWRCB. Finally, final plans and specifications must also be approved. And so proceeding with construction without receiving such approval from the State Board on the SWRCB process and on the plans and specifications could render the project ineligible or jeopardize funding. Following approval, the recipient will then proceed with construction, final invoicing, and then, of course, project closeout. Next slide, please. Taking a step back to discuss a little bit more the details of the grant agreement. So as was mentioned earlier, the grant agreement will require applicants to submit any remaining technical, environmental, and financial information. Recipients will be required to submit these along with the simplified forms that we are currently preparing and posting on our website. And once these are received, DFA will review to ensure all grant agreement conditions have been met, then authorize the recipient to proceed with bidding. We wanted to note here that this is different compared to the regular Drinking Water Estate Revolving Fund program. In the regular process, these steps are completed upfront prior to issuing a funding agreement. And in this case, it would be the opposite. So upon selection of a contractor, DFA will review bid documents and approve the release of construction funds. And as noted earlier, the SWRCB process must be complete prior to construction. The division will consider amendments to review grant scope, cost, or schedule on an as-needed basis. Next slide, please. Applicants will be required to submit the project proposal form, which is Appendix B to the draft guidelines. In addition to that, a scope of work, an engineering document, a completed self-certification form, and an adopted authorized representative resolution will be required prior to receiving a grant agreement. The environmental and financial packages can be provided either with the project proposal form or submitted after execution of the grant agreement, but must in all cases be submitted and approved prior to any construction work occurring. Next slide. This concludes the presentation portion of the workshop for the draft guidelines of the Expedited Drinking Water Grant Funding Program. We have posted here a link to the public notice, which includes details on how to submit written comments, which are due by noon this Friday, February 10th. If you have further questions or comments, please email us at the link here, which is osws@waterboards.ca.gov. And then additional information, including the attachments we just referenced, are being posted to the program page, which is also shown at the bottom of this slide. We also wanted to note that we plan to review input from these workshops and the written comments, and then bring an updated version of the guidelines before the board for consideration of adoption on March 7th, 2023. We thank you for your time, and we're happy to take any questions, comments, feedback, and input.
Just off the bat, just huge thanks. I know that this has been a long time in making, insofar as it's been a few years now that we've really been focused on how do we better deliver to communities. And over the last 3 years, going from 1.6 million Californians without access to here under 1 million shows that we can have success and have an emphasis, but we still have a lot of work still yet to do. And there are ways like this streamlining that we can create the pathways that get to solutions faster in communities, knowing that for many of these projects, they are timelines of 6, 7, 8 years. And because of complexity and a number of issues that may be out there, some of them on our side, and this is our continued opportunity and real focus on ensuring that we're doing just that, clearing the decks, if you will, a bit on our side, even as we have real issues oftentimes with communities. I think of our consolidation work, particularly where there's other fundamental tensions that stop a project necessarily from moving forward. So just thanks for the thoroughness of this work. I know, again, it's been a lot of group effort as well, not just from internally from us, but water agencies, stakeholders, state audit offices have all been important partners to how we continue to do better and live up to this incredible generational opportunity I think that we all continue to talk about here in the state as we really continue to focus on these systems that are most challenged amongst us. So I don't have anything right off the bat. I know we will hear some comments. I appreciate there's already been a lot of good discussion generated around how are we approaching the streamlining, who's part of that streamlining, particularly how do we treat a public-private divide that kind of exists in our structures generally, and are we perpetuating those or not? I see us not doing that. I know we'll get into some discussion around that and appreciate we have folks from the investor-owned utilities here to help discuss how we, not just expedite on the public side, but also across what we know is the many flavors in which water is provided and delivered in the state. So looking to my colleagues, if there's any comments or questions off the bat, and then otherwise we have some commenters. Board Member Firestone, please.
Yeah, thanks. I echo everything you've said, and I want to, I think I'll have questions after public comments, but just before we get to public comments, I wanted to see if staff wanted to speak a little bit to just off the bat on the reasoning why we are proposing to focus on public entities. If you could just give a brief framing of that as before we get into public comment, that'd be great.
I think it'll be helpful.
Sure.
Tasni.
Good morning. Megan Tosny, an Assistant Deputy Director in the Division of Financial Assistance. I think one of the main differentiations we see as far as how the private entities move through our funding process is related to CEQA. Generally, for those entities, we need to be the CEQA lead, and that just leads to, greater uncertainty on the timeline of getting through those approvals, and will make it more challenging for us to fit them into this expedited timeline that we're working with for this program. And that's kind of the main thing. There are some other unique things that come up with private entities as far as sort of determining ownership and which entity we're actually entering into an agreement with and various things like that. But those are sort of very case-by-case issues that come up, and the one that sort of broadly applies across them all is the CEQA issue, I would say.
Thank you, Ms. Tosny. And thank you, Board Member. I think we'll definitely be exploring that more in our conversation here, so thanks. Other board colleagues, anything off the bat? Any questions, comments? Okay, let's move to our first commenter, who is Don White.
I'm going to say good morning because almost
yeah.
here fast
Still
enough,
good morning,
right?
still good morning. Just
Yeah,
ahead.
no, but Chair Escobar and board members, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to me. My name is Dawn White. I am the Water Quality Manager with Golden State Water Company. Golden State Water is a CPUC-regulated water utility, and we operate 38 water systems across the state, many of those systems in disadvantaged communities. I was also on the SAFER Advisory Group for 2 years. So I'm working very closely with DDW, DFA, and SAFER staff to find solutions for small failing systems outside of our service boundaries. Golden State Water recently acquired a system that is on the Human Right to Water list and is in the process of a funding application and the construction of a new well and treatment plant to bring this community safe drinking water after 15 years, more than 15 years of being out of compliance. Because of where our systems are located, there are many nearby systems that we would like to help. The recent draft guidelines exclude Golden State Water and remove a funding tool for us to help provide safe and reliable water service for these troubled systems. We all want safe drinking water grant funds to be dispersed expeditiously. We support that. However, this proposed process seems to unfairly discriminate against some Californians based on their drinking water provider. And it limits our ability to provide solutions for communities that are asking for our help.
The State Water Board needs to focus on urgent water projects that improve public health. The expedited drinking water grant funding program should be available to benefit the communities most in need, regardless of the type of utility that serves them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. White. Next, I'd like to call up Clint Olivier, and we followed by Kyle Griffith.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can. Good afternoon.
Okay, excellent. Good afternoon. I wanted I've been on since the beginning of the meeting, and I wanted to first thank the board, members of the board, for doing such a great job of recognizing Janine Townsend. As a former city council member, I totally, of the city of Fresno, I totally understand how important a clerk of the board is, and really is where the rubber meets the road. So thank you to Janine Townsend for her 15 years of service to this board. So wanted to start out with that. Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Clint Olivier, and I'm the CEO of the Central Valley Business Federation, or BizFed for short. We're a grassroots alliance of over 75 businesses and organizations representing 30,000 diverse employers and over 400,000 employees in the Central Valley. We go from the Grapevine up to Madera County. Board members, thank you for the opportunity to comment on the expedited drinking water grant funding program. We appreciate the state of California taking action to accelerate high priority projects to increase drinking water supplies. As those of us in the Central Valley know, it's a critical issue. We do have some concerns regarding the program's eligibility requirements. As it stands right now, the program excludes private water providers from these grants. We believe that the community at large would be better served if that access were expanded to include private water providers. Our goals are the same as others. Approximately 20% of the state are served by non-public water agencies, meaning 1 in 5 Californians are potentially losing out on projects that will improve their access to safe and clean drinking water. Many of those will unfortunately end up being from our region. So let's take Tulare, for example. Roughly 30% of the population is served by non-public agencies and would be denied the ability to access these funds. And we believe that that is not fair. For example, in counties like Tulare, where 30% of the population, again, is served by non-public agencies, that would be net access to the funds. We should ensure that all communities in the state can apply for these grants rather than the inequitable draft proposed today. Thank you all, board members.
Thank you. I think important to note, this doesn't limit access to funding. This is a streamlining project that, the attempt and the spirit here is not to discriminate, and it's not personal, and it's not an attack on IOUs. Although I feel some, sense that there's a feeling of that. So this isn't a reduction in access to funding for the IOUs. But what it is, and is an attempt by us to try to bucket out those projects that these complicating issues that arise, kind of figure out where that spot is of projects that don't have them, be able to move forward with them more expeditiously. And here we're hearing the distinction is around CEQA. Important to also note, this is a workshop and is why we're wanting this feedback. It's part of the process, and we appreciate the discussion around it. I did want to just clarify that, it's not a reduction in funding and access and for communities, but I can see how, again, if there is a streamlining process that is out there and folks aren't feeling they are able to avail themselves, there is a difference there. I'm not trying to minimize that, but also for those listening, trying to help kind of couch what might be the actual intention here as opposed to some of the feeling from some of the entities.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Olivier. And again, thank you incredibly for your thanks to Jenny.
Chair Esquivel, can I just mention one thing? Just for this, as we go through with public comments, one thing I am also interested in to hear from the public, the investor and utilities is The other piece, in addition to not being CEQA leads, I know there's also additional hoops to jump through with the CPUC. And I think there's a number of people here, that I see in the audience virtually that are experts in that. And so from the, as we understand how to accelerate these really high priority projects, no matter, what type of entity is providing water, if we can, I think what we're trying to do is figure out what can move really quickly and what has to jump through more hoops, regardless of what we do within our funding process. So from outside rules that we can't control. So it would be really helpful just to hear as you go through how, and again, this is a workshop as you develop written comments as well. But just understanding that role of the CPUC determinations and approvals that also would be required within a project involving an investor and utility, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, board member. And yeah, I'll note for what it's worth, I know there can be fundamental tensions sometimes for folks out there between private and ownership and public around water delivery and such. I carry none of those. I think what's really important to focus on is actual access and actual outcomes in our communities, and know that there is just a healthy ecosystem out there where there are investor-owned utilities, and providing a clean water are an important part of our solutions. And I think the work that we've done as well with the PUC has been around how do we flatten that landscape as well around consolidations, helping communities really be empowered around those decisions to begin with. So it's not us deciding up here, but really creating that playing field that's even. And so committed to that for folks. Next, I'd like to call up Rami Kalon.
Hi, good afternoon, board members, Chair Esquivel.
Great to see you again.
You again as well, and as well. My name is Rami Kalon. I am Director of Regulatory Affairs for California Water Service. Cal Water is the second largest water utility in California. We have a large geographic footprint that extends from Chico through the Bay Area into the Central Valley, as well as Los Angeles County. Cal Water serves 2 million Californians in over 100 communities. I also serve currently as a SAFER Advisory Group member. I was really happy to see that the State Board was considering an expedited grant program. As we all know, timely grant funding is really important for funding critical water infrastructure projects, particularly in disadvantaged communities. But I was equally dismayed to read that the guidelines specifically exclude regulated water utilities who collectively serve 6 million Californians. It's a lot of folks. And I'm not sure why this is the case. The funding sources which the staff went over today used to make grants are not restricted to Californians who are served by a particular type of utility. And the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund, that's actually overseen by the SAFER Advisory Group, and it's specifically earmarked for disadvantaged communities, regardless of who provides them water. Needless to say, customers of regulated water utilities are also taxpayers who have provided funds by which the grants rely, and they deserve safe water as well. Let me address the prioritization. The guidelines contain provisions for funding prioritization, the human right to water, regulatory priority, drought-related timeliness, status of environmental review. None of those prioritization criteria justify the case for excluding non-public agency water systems. Now, Chair Esquivel, for like yourself, you just mentioned, and for others who say the State Board is just expediting grant funds for some entities and not denying funding, you're correct. However, while you create a fast track for some, it's inevitable that non-public agency grants will be slower in coming. And that's just not right. The state auditor released its report last summer, criticizing the State Board for the time it took from receipt of an application to actually making the grant funding available. It didn't distinguish between the types of entities applying for grants. It basically wanted the state board to speed up the grant process from what it had determined to be a 33-month process, which it had deemed was way too long. And it said that the 9-month policy that the state board once had been discarded. Okay? That brings up my next question. I've just sent some time, shared with you some timelines that the state auditor had in their report. I'm really concerned that the draft guidelines do not contain any goals, timelines, or requirements to affirmatively act on grant applications. So, for me, without measurable metrics, how will the state board be able to assess whether that grant funding is expedited or not? Right now to the public agencies. But this is an easy fix. I think what the state board should do is to speed grant disbursement for all water suppliers instead of discriminating against Californians who are served by a CPUC regulated water supplier. I think you need to establish firm, measurable timelines for approval for each step of the application process. And I was happy to hear that this is a workshop and that the staff and the board is willing to take input and then to revise their guidelines accordingly. I don't want you to make a policy mistake. It has too many ramifications. Cal Water will also be submitting written comments to the state board on February 10th. Now, if I may, I'd like to just address Board Member Firestone. In a previous role, I served at the California Public Utilities Commission. I served for 12 years as the Water Division Director there and spent my entire career since 1988 in water utility regulation, essentially. Cal Water, the company I work for right now, we just accepted 3 grants from DWR. These are the DWR drought grants. We did not have to get approval from the Public Utilities Commission, our financial regulator, to accept those grants. We just don't have to get approval to accept grants. And this other issue about CEQA, I'm going to say I just don't follow it. The CPUC had a CEQA team, the Public Utilities Commission. They did evaluate projects where they were the lead agency. I don't ever recall the CPUC being the lead agency for grant projects. In fact, they just weren't involved. So that can't be the gating factor that makes giving grants to regulated entities slower than for public agencies. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I'll be submitting written comments. Thank you again, all. And
I
I'm happy
appreciate
to
that.
take any questions if the board so chooses.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the written comments and appreciate the good contributions. Thank you. Next, and apologies, Mr. Griffith, I skipped over you. I'd like to call up Kyle Griffith. And unless Board Member Firestone, I'm not sure if you had your hand up there for a moment or not. Okay, thank you.
No comments at this time. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Griffith. Next, I'd like to call up Magali Torres.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
My name is Magali Torres, and I serve as the Executive Assistant for the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to join you all today and also the opportunity to review the board's proposed drinking water grant program. I just want to say that we echo the concerns raised by other speakers about private water agencies not being able to access the streamlining process, and we appreciate the opportunity to comment. But we support expedited funding for drinking water infrastructure, and we urge you to reconsider an inequitable process in which 2 classes of Californians are created, those who get fast-tracked funding and those who get slow-tracked funding. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can I now like to call up Jennifer Capitolo? Thank you.
Thank you. In thinking about today, I was trying to think of an analogy that would help describe how regulated utilities are feeling right now. And I think if everyone in this room had a broken leg and we all walked into a hospital and we said, you over here on this side of the room, you get to go through the expedited process. And you over here on this side of the room, you have to go through, I think we've heard it called the slow track process, the regular old process that we know the state auditor says doesn't work. And I think what it really comes down to there is what the state auditor report said for those who are on the slow track. That means they're going to have delayed public health. They're going to have to sit with a broken leg for longer and not get their cast right away. And secondly, it's going to cost more if they have to sit there and not get services right away. And that's a really big part of why we're here today making this case that we need a parallel track for regulated utilities. So again, Executive Director of California Water Association, Jennifer Capitolo, we represent all of the water utilities regulated by the PUC, 94 strong, about 6 million Californians, a little over 15% of the state is served by regulated utilities. You've heard from our members today and a couple of other folks that ended up calling in as well. I'm not going to rehash what they said, but I really want to focus on some of what was shared today. Regulated utilities nationwide, we do have that public-private tension, but I'm really proud in California. We've stepped up, we've proved our worth. Folks know that we are on parallel with public agencies. I would like to say we're better, but in providing drinking water services, safe, healthy, clean, affordable drinking water. So we don't have that tension. So when we do have tension like this, I think it hurts even more for us to have to come to a setting like this and make the case that we deserve to be treated equal. And that I feel like we're using some words, discrimination, equality, those are big words, but that really is how we feel in this setting. And I don't think that you, the Water Board members, staff, I do think you want inclusion, that you don't want communities to be left out of this process. So we've been really spending some time thinking about what are we going to say? How can this be fixed? And thank you, Board Chair, for taking some time to talk to me and staff. And I think where we're at right now is that we'd really like a call to action written in the guidelines that says that you are willing to show up, to meet with us, to have regular meetings, to work with the commission and create a parallel track for expediting with regulated water utilities so that we can focus on this issue with CEQA. That's a staffing issue for you. If you can't finish our CEQA in time in-house, then we need to bring more resources to you, however that ends up working out. We, for years, have said, we're a regulated utility, but your forms are only for public agencies. So every time we fill out a grant application, we have to figure out how to fit ourselves into your form. And that's not fair. We don't ask people in other settings to try to fit themselves into someone else's form that's obviously not written for them. You do have a MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with the Public Utilities Commission. There's a lot of duplication that happens between what the commission asks us to do and what you ask us to do in this financing of debt or grant receipts. And if we can streamline any of that between the public agency, the two agencies, and use that MOU process to make some of those improvements, that's something that we want to do. I think that it would benefit all of you if we started referring to this as a pilot project, because it really is a pilot project, right? You've never done this before. You've never streamlined. Some of what Rami said is like, if you're going to try something new, you really do need metrics. Put a time frame onto this. We're going to try this for 2 years. We're going to see if it works. At the end of the 2 years, we're going to look at the results and evaluate, are we really expediting grant applications? And it's easier, I think, for us to, discrimination's never okay, but it's easier for us to stomach if it's a short-term pilot project focused with metrics, and there's some light at the end of the tunnel for us to be able to see those metrics, build off of it, benefit from it as well in the future. I think also, the way that eligible applicants is described, if you're really focused on CEQA, if that's really what the hang-up of this is, we don't need to have a grant process sitting out there that says you're eligible and you're obviously not eligible. Let's instead say projects that are completed with their CEQA or can do their CEQA in-house, that's who's really eligible in this, if that's really what you're hung up on. But I think broadly, Board Member Firestone, you said hoops. There's a lot of hoops. We'd like to work with you on our hoops too. Our hoops might not always be the same. And we've done some training for staff. I think that's one of the hoops. We're happy to come in and talk more with your staff. Understand regulated utilities. Please understand us. Please understand how we're structured. If we really are in parity, if there's no difference, we're all providing good, safe, clean drinking water to folks, then, equally try to understand us so that we can benefit from this in the future too. So Mine is really, a future commitment. That's what I'm asking you for today, is to figure out a path forward to include us going forward. Thanks. Oh, and I do want to mention on the CEQA issue, Dawn White, who's here, she's got a lot of experience in CEQA, so I can send her back up and she can talk a little bit more about CEQA.
Thank you, Ms. Capitola. I want to reiterate what I told you when you first came to me. Again, very concerned. Again, I think there was a lot of hard feelings that people were feeling singled out. IOU singled out in this, and that's not the case. And the door has always been open, continues to be, and I think we have actually a record of understanding well the IOUs. And then on this effort particularly, yes, let's figure out, what are those other complications and hoops. We're still in the workshop on this, so we'll figure out. We're in the middle of discussing this, and it is a pilot project in many ways. And as far as the metrics goes, there are metrics. They may not be in the specifics of this here, but the larger SAFER program, I think, as you all well know, has an incredible amount of data and metrics. It's why the auditor was able to understand how long our processes were taking, although questionable why they chose 2017 at the start when the program was transferred, or at the start of SAFER. But nonetheless, I appreciate everyone's engagement around this very serious effort, and the commitment continues to be to work across the IOU space because it is a continuum, and recognize that. So my commitment is still firm there, and appreciate the feelings that folks are having still nonetheless. Ms. White.
Okay. So I had said earlier that I manage the water quality programs for Golden State Water Company, and that includes permitting with the Division of Drinking Water, which includes CEQA. And so that process at my company is managed in my group. So I've got quite a bit of experience and have worked with the water boards as lead agency for many, many years. A number of years ago, there were real slowdowns and problems getting CEQA determinations made. That's not happening right now. And I guess I was just surprised that CEQA is being used as one of the reasons, because, most of our projects do go through the water boards for the CEQA determination. That won't change whether it's a grant project or not. We're not seeing, or I'm personally not seeing, slowdowns. We work really well with the staff who manage that or make those determinations. And so I guess I was just surprised, and I wanted to share that. The other point I would want to make, I don't know if everybody knows, is that when we do submit, a project for a determination, if an initial study, neg deck is needed, we do all that with outside consultants ahead of time. So we prepare all the documentation and provide it to staff here to question, ask for, and then make their determinations. And so, we have a dozen a year, and they're all going very smoothly. So I guess I just wanted to express my surprise at that being a reason. So thank you for giving me a second chance to talk to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Colleagues, anything further from folks? This has been a good discussion, I know, particularly around this challenge that I think folks are feeling around IOUs. Okay. Oh, yeah. Thanks. I may have some additional speakers, I think, actually. Thanks for flagging that, sir. Looks like Eric Orellana. Apologize, Eric. It looks like my comment sheet did an update. Good to see you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Orellana. I'm a senior policy advocate with Community Water Center. I wanted to just run over here and give some comments in really strong support of the effort that the State Water Board is outlining here as part of this expedited drinking water grant guidelines. As the presentation sort of discussed, this has really been a long effort to increase the access of safe and clean drinking water for communities across the state. And I'm confident that the Division of Financial Assistance has been working with stakeholders and community members across the state to really learn where they can improve. And this is a real action step that confirms to me that this is something the State Water Board is prioritizing and taking very seriously. So I shared that we're in strong support of these guidelines and wanted to just provide some recommendations. We're finalizing our comment letter that we'll be submitting prior to the Friday deadline. But just wanted to make a couple of comments here. One of our recommendations is going to be a recommendation to increase the project funding limit to $20 million per project. Above that, to require a special exemption by the deputy director. Given some of the projects that Community Water Center is working on the Central Coast as a technical assistance provider, we think it warrants increasing that, as we are currently above that $10 million per project cost, Central Coast. Another one is clarifying whether design and permitting costs can be funded under this program. Was really happy to hear that during the presentation this was clarified as an eligible expense, but I think the guidelines could do a little bit more to clarify that. One thing that we're really excited about as well is the mention of adopting an advance payment program as well. And so we'd really like to hear or see a timeline for when those guidelines will be adopted as part of the development of this. We don't want this program or process to be delayed, but a mention of that would be great. And then lastly, we also wanted to sort of lend our support for expanding access to this program to investor-owned utilities. IOUs are a great partner across the state and some of the communities that we work with. It is, I think, warranted to mention that it is important for the resources of the public and utilities to predominantly be held under public oversight. And so we do prioritize and wish that there are some parameters around expanding this eligibility to IOUs. And so some of the ones that are parameters that we'd like to see as part of this expansion is, one, and first and foremost, that community support intended investor-owned utilities as the project applicant or as taking on the project. Like for investor-owned utilities to only be eligible as a receiving system for a consolidation of domestic wells or a failing or at-risk water system. Would like for public receiving systems and funding applicants to be considered, so public agencies to be considered as a priority, and only moving forward with an investor-owned utility as when we know that a public agency is not the feasible option, or it would significantly delay the process. And then on the CEQA issue, we'd like for a local public agency to have committed to be the CEQA lead requirement for expanding this eligibility as well. Looking forward to sending our written comments, and thanks again to the board and staff for all their work in this expedited grant guidelines process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oriana. Apologies for that again, and thanks to Board Member McGuire for flagging. And thanks for the constructive addition around the support, and then also desire for some sort of framework around it too. So thank you. Oh, I apologize. Janine Short has their hand up on the platform and can have them speak. And looking to speak as well, Mr. Johnson. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Ms. Short.
Okay. My name is Jenny Short. I work with the Garberville Sanitary District, and we provide water to a small, severely disadvantaged community. We have about 450 customers. And just to give you kind of some perspective, we are charging $135 a month for water and sewer service for just a basic residential connection. So affordable rates is a real problem in our area. So as I went through the guidelines when they were presented, one of the big questions for us is revolves around Area 7 about the eligibility of reimbursable expenses. We have pretty limited financial assets to be able to front the planning and preliminary engineering work that is required to be eligible for the program. It would really help us if the guidelines are very, very clear about what will be reimbursable once the grant agreement is in place, so that we can evaluate that risk of using those limited financial assets to produce the environmental document. And we act as lead agency, and we would be applying with a notice of determination that's been recorded and a preliminary engineering report that's been prepared. And so all of that is a fairly significant cost to a really small district like us. And so it's a risky thing. And the more that we know about the eventual reimbursableness of those expenses, the better it is for us to evaluate that risk. And so if it's as simple as just putting in there that when the grant agreement is drafted, that consideration will be given to having a date that is in the past to be able to pick up those expenses for small disadvantaged communities, it would make a really big difference for us.
Thank you, Ms. Short. Really appreciate the constructive and good comment. Okay. Oh, and Mr. Johnson, it's okay. By all means, come up and, of course.
But I really appreciate the opportunity to address the board. My name is Eric Johnson. I'm with the Tuolumne Utilities District. We're one of the few public water systems here today to speak to this. So Tuolumne Utilities District has been in existence about 30 years. We serve the city of Sonora and surrounding communities of Tuolumne County. We operate 11 water systems. Most of them are small and serve disadvantaged communities. We've undertaken 19 water system consolidations in our existence. Most recently, last week, we celebrated the Curtis Creek Elementary School consolidation, and your own board member Firestone was there to celebrate that with us. We're currently working with your staff on a number of other consolidations. What I'd like to say or preface my comments before we address the proposal is there's many different ways to analyze the delays in these projects. I mean, the critical path could be right-of-way acquisition, it could be CEQA, it could be, in many cases, your local agencies. And I know you guys have spent a lot of time on technical assistance and on trying to empower local water agencies. And what we know in Tuolumne County is that they are very small. Most of these are mom and pop kind of operations. They only have a few staff, if any. Some of them view it as a volunteer type of community outreach type of operation. And so when they need assistance, they really don't know who to turn to. And it's your local funding coordinators, your regional funding coordinators, which are your first line of staff, your boots on the ground, if you will. They're the ones that collaborate with these small water agencies, and they don't really necessarily know the process. And they have to convince their customers that this is a worthwhile endeavor. And they're struggling to operate their current systems, let alone undertake, costly capital improvements. And so the TUD has been there as a partner for your staff in order to collaborate with these small entities. Some of them are private mutual water companies. So to the extent that we as a public agency become a recipient and are the CEQA lead agency, there is some benefit to the small private, maybe investor-owned utilities, although we are in favor of including them in this as well. I'd like to make a couple observations. One being that there's also a bit of a kind of a black box. When we submit a grant application, we feel it's very reasonable, the general financial, technical, and environmental packets. I think what's being asked is very fair. But when we're done with that and we believe we have a complete application, there isn't a clear time frame or an idea moving forward of when funding will be issued. So we're applauding the board in its latest proposal to expedite the grant funding, the grant agreement. It provides certainty of process. And these small water agencies, they have turnover. If they don't see that there is a clear path forward, they start to lose hope. And then they fall off the wagon. And now we have a project that had legs and then no longer is viable. The other point here, which I'm kind of preaching to the choir, is with expediting this funding, we're in a race against time as far as our infrastructure is concerned. It's deteriorating faster than we can replace it. In addition, cost escalation is increasing the project costs faster than our project budgets can react. And so by expediting this funding, we're not only going to save money, but we're also going to have better outcomes. In our particular case, there's an opportunity cost with the time it takes in order to bring these projects to fruition. What I mean by that is we have a project that's currently applied for, complete application, to consolidate 6 water treatment facilities into one with the potential to consolidate an additional 18. And if we don't receive funding soon, unfortunately, these 6 water treatment facilities are all reaching the end of their service life at about the same time. Very inconvenient. We will be forced to budget to the tune of millions of dollars to replace one at a time. And once we start going down that path, we're going to foreclose on the opportunity to really consolidate our system and yield some economy of scale and ensure that we can provide safe, reliable, and affordable drinking water to our community. So those are my comments. We're also in favor of expanding the one-time project funding limit to 20 million. And also, I would add that your CEQA criteria, have CEQA done in order to expedite, should probably also include permits. In our case, the permits tend to be the limiting factor. We can get our CEQA adopted as a lead agency. We can get your environmental review unit to sign off on it, but the permits can take a while. So we would also add that, and we will be submitting written comments. I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and we really appreciate everything your staff has done over the years. You've had tremendous impact to the communities of Tuolumne County.
Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson. I really appreciate the meaningful comments and continued engagement. And again, to your point, I think it's the loss of public trust, sometimes in institutions like ours or others, that drives some of the lack of progress on these things. And I just appreciate your acknowledgement of the complexity of the way these projects pan out. And again, here wholly for the board, we are here to own our part of it and make sure that we continue to do right by it. And if it wasn't for partners like you, I think of Coachella Valley Water District, I think of Placer County, I think of water districts in Lake County that actually drive that local leadership, that are here as valued partners. We wouldn't be able to fund or do what we do on this side of the ledger. So just appreciate the perspective and good comments that you provided us here today for the workshop, and look forward to continued work. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of our commenters. Board members, this is just a workshop. This was a very helpful and important one too. Heard a lot, heard some from the dais as well. But I think I'm interested here in further understanding, how we bucket out the good work that we've done here, how we can potentially bring in the IOUs as well, not see it as we're leaving out IOUs, but what are the characteristics of the effort that we're kind of focusing on, so people don't see, a type of water entity called out specifically. And then let's also, if need be on a kind of a parallel track with IOUs, with the relationship with the CPUC, which I hear again doesn't have to be, and I'm not saying is an excuse, but there are other hoops there. And so figuring those out, figuring out the issue on CEQA, whether it's part of this effort or parallel, and ensuring that we just continue to have what we've always had, which is just across the IOU public space, equitable access, if not very different legal and other requirements that come with them. So that's kind of from my seat, kind of what I'm feeling. Again, I want to explore it, see what we can do. I don't want it to delay too much this good work, because I think it needs to happen. But let's figure out how we lessen what is otherwise a sense from folks of an intentional signaling out of IOUs from the effort, as opposed to, again, you look at across the board, all of our work, and it's always with an eye of trying to advance both and not one over the other. But Vice Chair.
Well said. I agree entirely. And the only other thing I would add is just my thanks to you all for showing up, and for those of you who came in through Zoom. And then anxious to hear also about metrics, what can be done regarding metrics and formalizing, keeping us focused on timeframes. Thank you.
Vice Chair. Board Member Morgan and then Board Member McGuire. There's too much politeness at the dais. I'll call it. Board Member Morgan.
Yeah, I really don't have any additional comments. I echo the comments that have already been made and just wanted to really thank everyone for coming today and those that joined us via Zoom. A lot of good comments. Looking forward to the additional comment letters. And also just want to thank staff for having the workshop and looking to wait for additional ways to expedite processes and keep the good work moving forward. So thank you all.
Board Member McGuire.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the good comments today, and thank you for the presentation and bringing this workshop to us so quickly. I know this has been a really fast track in terms of development of this program on its own. So it makes sense that there's still a little opportunity here for giving some more thought to some of the good feedback that we've heard. Chair Esquivel, I completely agree with your comments as well. I'm very much receptive to thinking about how we can maybe explore making this more project focused in terms of eligibility versus entity focused in terms of, is CEQA completed or does it meet a certain level of expectation? Are the permits, to your point, Mr. Johnson, completed, or do we have a level of expectation of when they will be? And, I think some of the balancing here that we experience in having worked in Division of Financial Assistance at one time, I can appreciate how challenging it is that we want to preserve some level of flexibility in decision-making. We want to be able to get a project and be able to, adapt it to the funding program and make it work. Well, there's always that trade-off of not knowing everything about the project and not knowing, is it going to fit sort of the opportunity to expedite it and move it along more quickly. So I just wanted to add Ms. Short's comments about her small community water system and not really knowing, upfront, hey, are my expenses, that I've incurred for this project going to be eligible, given that they have a very limited budget. And I would expect that there's lots of water systems, there's lots of communities that would feel similarly, that if the guidelines don't spell that out, if the guidelines don't articulate, what's within, what's without, what's outside the scope of this program, it introduces a lot of uncertainty to them in their decision-making process. So for this one, it's new. It's an opportunity to find ways to move these projects along quickly. So I can understand maybe not having all of those details quite sorted out. And I know there's a lot of different pots of funding you're drawing from. So that's probably another challenge in terms of what's eligible and when. But I just want to suggest, think about where there's room to just be more clear about eligible expenses and, what fits squarely within the project. For example, the design, engineering and design work that might happen up front or might happen, during the funding process. So I just want to leave you with that thought. Again, a lot of great comments today. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Board Member. Board Member Firestone.
Yeah, I'll echo all of that. Thanks to staff for the, really rolling up your sleeves quickly and figuring out a pathway to try and get things moving really fast when we've got kind of super high priority, low hanging fruit, I guess. And also just working through, the comments that I think folks are bringing that are really constructive in terms of, as other board members just said, of looking at what are the hoops that systems have to go through, and can we make it based on that rather than explicit to a type of system. I do think I think Jennifer Capitello, your comments were correct in characterizing that this is kind of a first cut, I don't know if you call it a pilot. I'm happy for whatever label we put on it, but I think we want it to be something that we continue to learn from, however we finalize it after comments and revisions. And also, I think the really important thing is that this is not a standalone streamlining effort that's outside of the process improvements that staff are working really hard on undertaking to try and speed up funding for all projects. And so one of the things as we move forward in revisions and finalizing this is just, I'd really like for us to put it into context with the more general process improvements and metrics that we are developing for accelerating projects. Maybe not, may not be streamlining, I don't know, as a terminology, but I think what we want to see is acceleration across, certainly across our systems, but most importantly across just projects. We want to see outcomes faster. Both from our funding processes, but more importantly from the outcomes for people on the ground. And I know that is a major priority of our staff and this board that folks are working really hard on. So if we can just put that into context here, as in terms of how this program fits into that, and how really high priority, important projects that maybe don't fit exactly in this, shall we call it, pilot kind of streamlining effort, can still be accelerated, and what the expectations and metrics are for that. I think that would really help us see this as part of, a much more comprehensive effort that's focused on accelerating outcomes for high priority projects. And then lastly, I just really appreciate, I know there's been a lot of discussions with our staff on and the investor-owned utilities on kind of working through whether it's differences between IOUs and public agencies in terms of contracting and other steps that investor-owned utilities need to go through, and with our work with the CPUC and trying to coordinate our efforts. So I want to acknowledge that and continue to support just making sure that, again, we're streamlining or accelerating outcomes here. I think that's everyone's goal. Certainly any project we do here is one piece of that effort to accelerate outcomes and to prioritize communities that are most in need. And I just look forward to making sure that we can do that, do each of these steps swiftly, and appreciate all the work going into it. Thanks.
Thank you, board member, and agree around the context that this isn't the only process improvement that's going on. It's not the only work, but again, appreciate folks' contributions to the discussion on how to improve it. So thank you. I think that wraps up, and again, appreciate everyone's really good contributions, and we'll have more. Again, this was just a workshop, it's not a vote, and so we'll have follow-up discussion and look forward to just the continued focus on, this year is, we continue to hear, we understand how the pressures on our water systems aren't going anywhere, and we, especially with aging infrastructure, we really need to take advantage of this moment and do as much as we possibly can to prepare ourselves. And just thank everyone's work on this. Affordability continues to be just really critical and front of mind at this board as we pursue other maximum contaminant limits, investments in water recycling, all the things that we know are here before us. So thanks. That concludes item number 6 then, and now brings us to just the last couple cleanup items on our agenda. I apologize and appreciate everyone carrying through and just ending here so that we can get to our late lunch. So our next item is just board member reports. I actually, as hectic as things have been, haven't had much public speaking going on, so I don't have anything actually to report. Looking to my fellow colleagues, though.
I can
Board member
jump in just
Firestone.
because it's just following up on Tuolumne Utility District. So I just thought I'd jump in on that. I just was really honored to be part of a celebration that for this amazing project that Tuolumne Utility District undertook with the Curtis Creek Elementary School. There is just an amazing ceremony with all the kids there, and they not only were able to get a new drinking water supply, or a drinking water connection to the Tuolumne Utility District that means that they have reliable water, but also fire hydrants and fire and access to fire protection for not just the school, but also some of the neighboring communities along the line. And also just, this was a school where they've actually had to close school for days at a time after a power outage or other water supply problems, because their one supply takes so long to kind of retest and re-up. So just getting this project in place means that there's more instructional days for the kids. So really, really critical. I also just was so impressed how quickly it was done. It was less than, it was well less than a year that the whole project was constructed, and it was a matter of months, and it included a lot of mainline, a major extension. So just super impressive. And again, I also just impressed with the staff on our end that worked on that project to get all the approvals that it needed to get done. And I think that's the only thing I wanted to highlight. Thanks.
A great thing to highlight, and I'm really glad you were there. And it's been incredible to see the opportunities that we're better getting to again celebrate these successes that are out there. And just thanks for being out there, board member. McGuire.
Yes, hi, thank you. So yes, so the only one I have to highlight for you today is yesterday I had a chance to go to the California Municipal Utility Association Capital Day event here in Sacramento. And so I was able to talk with them about the drought, basically the condition that we're in, the uncertainty that we're facing. So a lot of the same conversation that we heard this morning in our updated item. The water supply strategy, and really just the outlook for the board, and what's coming up in 2023. So it was good, well attended, a lot of interest obviously in the things that we're doing. So I'm glad I had a chance to participate.
Fantastic. Nothing from the other board members? Okay. That concludes item number 7, board member reports, and brings us to our last item, the executive director's report. Ms. Sobek, anything you want to highlight? Anything make sure we need to peruse within what is always an incredible document, and folks should, if ever concerned that the board isn't productive, take a look.
Yeah, just I wanted to point out to folks that we've done a little bit of a facelift on the executive director's report. The content is pretty much the same, but we've tried to, we've put in an index, and it can link to the sections that you are most interested in. So hopefully it's a long report. Could have cut it back, but we decided to try to make it more accessible. And just wanted to note that for a while, at least, we're going to put at the top of the report the main developments in the water supply strategy. That's not really a sprint; it's really a longer term, over a series of years. So we don't always have daily or weekly updates, but we wanted to just make sure there's a good, easy place for major things that have happened over the previous month. So if people are asking you what we've been doing to implement or move that strategy forward, you'll be able to find it easily.
Thanks for that. I know that not easy to communicate the scope and scale of the work that's going on at the board and the regional boards, but appreciate the work that's gone into better organize that to make it more accessible. And I really appreciate it. Thanks. Okay. Any comments? Oh, Vice Chair, please.
Yes, I'm just double checking. I did look at the report, but I'm double checking on Chrome 6 because I know that we had committed to always including an update on that. So I'm just looking through real quickly. But if it's not included, if you could please include it in future reports.
Board member, Vice Chair. Okay, nothing further on item number 8 then. Concludes item number 8 and brings us to the end of today's board meeting. I want to just thank everyone for their participation. We have a closed session that we'll be going into. Our next board meeting is otherwise scheduled for February 22nd. Mr. Lawfer, anything further to note?
Yes, I just want to clarify that the board is meeting in closed session on the second item that was identified in the closed session agenda, which is the Blue Triton matter. That, as we discussed during public forum, is authorized under the government code section. I do want to clarify, because it is a little bit of an unusual proceeding, that the executive director and chief deputy, Jonathan Bishop, will not be going into closed session with the board because they have been ethically walled off from the advisory team and the board in that capacity. And so the closed session will consist of the board members, presiding hearing officer, presiding administrative hearing officer past. We haven't given him a full title yet. Mr. Lilly and his hearing office staff, senior. He wants to own that, okay. And then Chief Deputy Eric Oppenheimer, myself, and Assistant Chief Counsel Andy Sawyer.
Thank you for that, Mr. Lawfer. And that brings us to the end. We won't adjourn officially until after closed session. And I think we're going to try to gather at 1:15, if folks can. And we'll have a quick chat on, okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you again, everyone. Board meeting not adjourned, but will be once we're done with closed session. And we will see you on the 22nd, and just appreciate everyone's participation in today's discussion. Be safe, be well. See you on the 22nd. Is that okay? It's, we only have the room until 2 or something. Get it done. Yeah, I was gonna say, well, maybe let's get lunch and then just go. Yeah, you can just eat it. Yeah, we do working lunch.